The RMS Titanic was a giant of its time, built slowly and carefully in Belfast, Ireland, where the air smelled of iron, oil, and wet wood. Thousands of men moved along scaffolds, carrying heavy steel plates, hammering rivets, inspecting every inch of the hull. The sound of hammers was steady, rhythmic, like a soft heartbeat of industry. Cranes swung slowly, hoisting massive sections into place, their chains clinking gently with each movement. The workers paused occasionally, wiping their brows, adjusting their gloves, inspecting every seam, making sure that everything was perfectly aligned. The ship's hull stretched far along the water's edge, gleaming softly under the pale sun. It was immense, longer than streets in most cities, wide enough to hold countless cabins, lounges, dining halls, and corridors. The decks rose in layers, one above the other, each polished wooden plank laid carefully, every brass railing scrubbed until it reflected the light. The cabins were being furnished quietly, some with soft carpets, polished wood panels, and small brass handles that shone when touched. Long hallways echoed the gentle footsteps of workers walking slowly, checking corners, adjusting hinges, and making sure nothing was left incomplete. The air smelled faintly of varnish, wood polish, and the salty tang of the nearby river, blending into a calm, steady atmosphere of industry. As the ship neared completion, smaller details were added with deliberate care. Lifeboats were hung from davits, swaying gently in the breeze, ropes coiled neatly beside them. Buttons, doorknobs, and fixtures were polished and checked, gleaming softly in the dim light. Crew members moved slowly along the decks, inspecting everything, making sure that the engines were ready, the cabins clean, and the tables set. The smell of fresh paint mixed with warm bread being baked in the galley, the scent drifting through narrow corridors where passengers would one day walk. Some passengers arrived quietly, stepping onto the deck with small suitcases, pausing to look around. Their shoes clicked softly against polished wood, their fingers tracing the edges of railings, the brass cold under their touch. They leaned gently on the rails, watching the water ripple beneath, listening to the faint sigh of wind brushing the side of the ship. Everything was calm and slow, measured, as if the world itself had slowed to accommodate the ship. On the day of departure, the Titanic moved steadily toward the water. The engines hummed quietly, a deep, steady vibration underfoot. Seagulls circled overhead, their wings cutting through the soft morning mist. Waves lapped gently against the hull, echoing softly through the empty spaces between decks. Passengers walked slowly along the promenade deck, some pausing to look back at the harbor, noting the still water, the distant cranes, the quiet activity of men moving slowly along docks. Breakfast was served gently, plates clinking quietly, the soft aroma of coffee and freshly baked bread drifting into corridors. Sailors carried trays down narrow passageways, their steps deliberate, measured, careful not to rush. Children whispered softly, moving cautiously along polished floors, while servants adjusted curtains, fluffed pillows, and arranged towels. The air smelled faintly of salt, polish, and the warmth of cooking, mingling into a gentle, unhurried atmosphere. Days passed slowly aboard the ship. Passengers moved at their own pace, strolling along the decks, reading quietly in lounges, leaning against rails as wind brushed their faces. Music played softly from a piano in the lounge, the notes lingering in the air, unhurried, repeating in gentle rhythms. Chefs chopped vegetables, stirred soups, and baked bread, the aroma spreading along quiet corridors. Sailors climbed rigging, inspected ropes and pulleys, and adjusted sails, their movements steady and precise. Engineers checked gauges and valves, listening to the low hum of engines, adjusting levers gently as the great ship moved steadily across the calm Atlantic. Waves brushed against the hull, soft and constant, a gentle rhythm like a lullaby, echoing through the empty halls and cabins. Far ahead, in the quiet of night, dark shapes of ice floated silently. The stars glimmered faintly, reflected softly on the cold, calm water. Passengers leaned gently on the rails, watching the shapes move slowly past, feeling the chill in the air, breathing in the scent of sea and metal. Crew members walked quietly along decks, lanterns casting long, soft shadows. Each step was careful, measured, echoing faintly in the stillness. The water crept along lower decks slowly, pooling in corners, filling spaces beneath doors and along walls. Passengers were guided gently to lifeboats, wrapped in blankets, listening to the faint lapping of waves against the hull. The engines hummed steadily, the ship's great heart beating slowly as it rested in the dark, cold water. Morning came softly, the fog lifting gradually to reveal calm seas. A distant ship appeared slowly on the horizon, its shape dark against the pale sky. Passengers in lifeboats sat quietly, wrapped in blankets, listening to the steady rhythm of the water. Birds called faintly in the distance, the sun rose gently, scattering soft light across rippling waves. Crew members helped survivors aboard the rescue ship slowly, carefully, guiding them from the lifeboats with measured steps. The air smelled faintly of blankets, sea, and distant cooking, blending into a quiet, calm atmosphere. The Titanic itself rested silently below, a shadow beneath the endless waves, its story suspended in the still, vast ocean, years past. People remembered the Titanic not as drama, but as a quiet testament to human endeavor. Artifacts were recovered slowly, one by one dishes, letters, shoes, polished wood each preserved with care, dusted, and displayed in museums. Scholars studied the ship in gentle detail, examining every photograph, every blueprint, every record of passengers and crew. The ocean remained calm above the resting giant, waves brushing the silent steel, water passing over windows and railings, moving slowly, endlessly. The story of the Titanic drifted through history like a gentle tide, repeating softly in the minds of those who listened, told in long, slow sentences, the hum of engines, the whisper of water, the quiet echo of footsteps along empty corridors ready to lull anyone who listened into deep, undisturbed sleep. The ship continued its journey across the calm Atlantic, each wave brushing gently against the hull in a rhythmic, unending pattern. The decks stretched forward like soft wooden ribbons, polished and warm under the pale sunlight. Passengers walked slowly along them, some leaning on the railings, their fingers brushing lightly against the brass that had been polished until it reflected the light in a gentle shimmer. The wind moved softly, ruffling the hems of skirts, lifting the hats of men who adjusted them carefully. Children walked quietly beside their parents, their small footsteps barely audible against the smooth planks of the deck. In the dining halls, the aroma of bread, coffee, and delicate pastries drifted lazily into the corridors. Waiters moved at a steady, unhurried pace, placing plates on tables, adjusting cutlery, and serving cups of tea and coffee with gentle precision. The soft clinking of porcelain and the low hum of conversation created a background rhythm that was steady and calm, like the heartbeat of the ship itself. Passengers lingered over their meals, sipping slowly, reading letters, or observing the gentle motion of the waves outside the large windows. Below deck, the crew moved with quiet efficiency. Engineers checked gauges and turned valves slowly, listening to the steady hum of the engines, the vibrations traveling softly through the metal floors. Sailors inspected ropes and pulleys, climbing the rigging carefully, adjusting each line with meticulous attention. Every task was performed with measured patience, the repetition creating a subtle, hypnotic rhythm that filled the ship from bow to stern. The scent of oil and polished metal mixed faintly with the salty air, drifting up through the stairwells and corridors. Evenings arrived gently, the sky shifting in soft hues of pink and lavender. The sun sank slowly toward the horizon, casting long shadows along the deck. Passengers strolled quietly, observing the water, the clouds, the faint glimmer of light on the waves. The air cooled slightly, carrying the subtle scent of the sea. Lanterns were lit, glowing softly in the corridors and halls, their light reflecting on polished brass and wood, creating warm pools of illumination in the dim surroundings. The soft music of a piano drifted through the lounges, the notes unhurried, lingering in the air, creating a gentle echo that mingled with the faint sound of the waves. At night, the water around the Titanic seemed endless and calm, stretching far beyond sight. The stars glimmered quietly above, their reflections flickering softly on the surface of the ocean. Icebergs floated silently in the distance, dark shapes that moved imperceptibly with the tides. The crew patrolled the decks with lanterns, walking slowly, their footsteps echoing faintly against steel and wood. Passengers leaned on rails, wrapped in shawls and coats, observing the stillness of the night. There was no rush, no urgency, only the soft, measured rhythm of life on a great ship, moving steadily through the vast, quiet ocean. Below deck, the corridors were long and echoing, the walls polished and smooth. Cabin doors creaked faintly as they were opened and closed, footsteps moving softly over carpets and wooden floors. The engines continued their gentle hum, a constant presence beneath the feet of everyone aboard. Steam hissed softly from valves, blending with the faint scent of oil and metal. Crew members moved quietly, checking lights, adjusting equipment, and ensuring that every corner of the ship was in order. The repetition of their movements, the slow, careful attention to detail, added to the hypnotic rhythm that seemed to envelop the entire vessel. Passengers spent their days in calm routines. Some wrote letters at small wooden desks, the pen scratching softly against paper. Others read books, turning pages slowly, pausing to observe the gentle rocking of the ship. Conversations were quiet, measured, the tones low and even. Children played quietly in designated areas, their laughter subdued and soft, blending with the distant hum of engines and the faint lapping of water. Meals were served with gentle regularity, the plates and cutlery creating a soft rhythm as they were placed on tables, adjusted, and removed again. The smell of freshly baked bread and roasted meat moved lazily through the ship, mingling with the salty air that drifted in through open windows and deck doors. The days and nights passed with a steady, unchanging rhythm. Waves lapped softly against the hull, creaking metal and polished wood resonating faintly with each motion. Sailors adjusted ropes, engineers checked gauges, passengers walked or rested, all moving in calm, deliberate cycles. The Titanic seemed to float timelessly, a great, slow-moving vessel in a vast, quiet sea. Even as distant icebergs loomed, their dark forms reflected softly on the water. The world seemed to move in a gentle, hypnotic rhythm that lulled everyone aboard into a sense of calm, steady sleepiness. The ship glided steadily through the calm waters, each gentle swell causing a soft, almost imperceptible rocking that moved through every deck, cabin, and corridor. Passengers leaned lightly against the railings, watching the subtle rise and fall of the waves, feeling the cool breeze brush against their faces. The sound of water sliding along the hull was constant and soothing, a quiet accompaniment to the faint hum of the engines below. Lanterns flickered softly in the evening air, casting gentle golden reflections on the polished wood and brass of the decks, while shadows stretched lazily along the promenades and stairwells. In the cabins, people moved slowly, adjusting their belongings, folding clothes, and setting aside letters they had been writing. The air carried faint scents of soap, clean linens, and the distant aroma of cooking drifting from the galley. A soft creak of metal echoed occasionally as the ship responded to the motion of the sea. Passengers opened their windows slightly, letting in the fresh, salty air that mingled with the warm, muted glow of lanterns. Each room had its own quiet rhythm, the low scrape of a chair across the floor, the gentle thud of footsteps along carpeted hallways, and the occasional, soft sigh of someone reclining in a chair, eyes drifting toward the distant horizon. The crew moved with calm precision, attending to every small task without haste. Engineers walked slowly along narrow catwalks, adjusting valves and gauges, listening to the low, continuous hum of the engines. Sailors climbed rigging to inspect lines, each movement deliberate and measured. Below deck, the sounds of hissing steam and soft mechanical clicks mingled with the subtle vibrations of the ship, creating a constant, hypnotic rhythm. Life jackets were checked, lifeboats gently swayed in their davits, and every rope and chain was inspected and coiled with care. The monotony of these tasks, repeated countless times, added to the steady, drowsy tempo that seemed to flow through the entire ship. As the days moved slowly forward, passengers settled into routines that were soft, predictable, and calming. Morning light would filter gently into cabins, illuminating polished wood panels, brass handles, and neatly folded linens. People moved quietly, reading letters, turning pages of books, or gazing out at the endless ocean. Meals were served with careful timing, the soft clatter of plates, the quiet shuffle of trays, and the gentle hum of conversation forming a steady, almost musical pattern. Children played in muted tones, their movements slow and deliberate, while servants moved through corridors with gentle efficiency, fluffing pillows, straightening rugs, and adjusting drapes. The ocean around the Titanic seemed endless, stretching out into a horizon that never changed. Waves lapped rhythmically against the hull, a constant soft sound that echoed through the ship. The night sky filled gradually with stars, their light reflected gently on the water's surface, creating a mirror of sparkling, quiet brilliance. Icebergs floated in the distance, silent and massive, their slow movements imperceptible against the steady current. Crew members walked along the decks with lanterns, their soft footsteps blending with the creak of wood and steel, the distant hum of the engines, and the whisper of wind over the open water. Passengers often leaned over the rails at night, feeling the cool breeze, listening to the soft slap of waves, and watching the stars flicker in the dark sky. Each movement aboard the Titanic was calm and deliberate. Some wrote quietly by lamplight, letters sliding slowly across paper. Others read books or simply closed their eyes and listened to the unbroken rhythm of the ship. The ship itself seemed to breathe slowly with the motion of the waves. Every deck, every cabin, every corridor moving in perfect unison with the soft sway of the water. Evenings were long and measured. The sun sank gradually, painting the horizon in soft shades of pink, lavender, and pale gold. Shadows stretched across polished wood, railings, and staircases. Lanterns were lit with careful hands, their glow filling the lounges and corridors with gentle pools of light. Soft piano music floated through the air, the notes lingering lazily before fading into the gentle hum of the engines and the constant rhythm of water against metal. Passengers moved through these spaces slowly, some lingering over their meals, some walking on deck, some pausing to gaze at the endless ocean, all moving at a pace that was soothing, unhurried, and unchanging. Below deck, the engineers continued their careful work, adjusting dials and levers, checking gauges, and listening to the steady rhythm of steam and engines. Sailors moved ropes and chains with slow, deliberate motions. Life jackets were checked, lifeboats swayed gently in the davits, and every piece of equipment was inspected, polished, and set in place. The repetition of these motions created a steady, hypnotic rhythm that seemed to permeate the entire ship. The subtle creaks and groans of metal, the soft hiss of steam, and the low vibrations from the engines formed a quiet, constant lullaby. As the Titanic moved onward, day after day, the routines of passengers and crew became almost imperceptible in their repetition. Passengers wrote letters, read quietly, walked along the decks, and watched the waves. Crew members moved through corridors and stairwells, attending to their tasks, adjusting equipment, checking cabins, and ensuring that every corner of the ship remained in calm order. The ocean itself seemed timeless, waves brushing softly against the hull, the sky slowly shifting from dawn to dusk, from dusk to night in a continuous, gentle cycle. The Titanic glided through the waters as if in a dream, its great bulk moving steadily, every deck, cabin, corridor, and railing in perfect synchrony with the waves. The gentle rocking, the hum of engines, the hiss of steam, the soft clatter of utensils, the muted footsteps of passengers, the faint whispers of wind and water all combined into a slow, rhythmic flow that filled the ship and its surroundings with calm monotony. Stars reflected softly on the water at night, lanterns cast warm glows in quiet corridors, and the soft, steady pulse of the ship itself moved in harmony with the endless, unchanging ocean. The days moved slowly, almost indistinguishably from one another. Sunlight spilled gently over the decks in the morning, casting soft, elongated shadows across polished wood and brass railings. Passengers emerged from their cabins with quiet, deliberate steps, adjusting hats and coats, their movements measured and unhurried. Some paused to peer over the edge of the railings, feeling the faint spray of the sea mist against their cheeks. The ocean stretched endlessly, a vast expanse of gentle waves, each one moving in a quiet, repetitive rhythm that seemed to match the slow, steady pulse of the ship itself. On deck, crew members walked slowly, lanterns in hand, checking the lines and rigging with meticulous attention. Every rope, every pulley, every metal fixture received the same deliberate inspection. Sailors climbed rigging at a measured pace, adjusting each line carefully, listening to the soft whisper of wind through the sails. Below deck, engineers moved among the machinery, adjusting valves and gauges, noting the gentle vibrations that passed through the ship. The engines hummed steadily, a deep, constant resonance that could be felt in every cabin and corridor. The dining rooms filled quietly with soft conversation and the gentle clatter of plates. Waiters moved through the space with calm precision, placing dishes of bread, fruit, and pastries in measured rhythm. The aroma of roasted meat and freshly baked bread lingered in the air, mixing faintly with the subtle scent of polished wood and waxed floors. Passengers lingered over their meals, turning pages of books or slowly writing letters. Children moved quietly along the carpeted halls, their small footsteps blending seamlessly with the muted noises of the ship. Evenings arrived with gentle slowness. The sky transformed gradually, moving from pale gold to soft pink, then into deep lavender and muted indigo. Shadows stretched across the decks, cast by the warm glow of lanterns, and the soft reflection of light on polished brass and wood created a calming pattern that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the ocean. Music floated lazily from pianos in the lounges, the notes lingering just long enough to fade softly into the hum of engines and the quiet lapping of waves. Passengers strolled along the promenade decks, pausing occasionally to watch the endless expanse of water or the slow drift of distant icebergs. The nights were slow and steady. The stars appeared gradually, twinkling faintly above the dark, smooth surface of the ocean. Icebergs loomed quietly in the distance, their massive shapes reflecting dimly in the water, moving imperceptibly with the currents. Crew members patrolled the decks with lanterns, their soft steps echoing gently against wood and steel. Below deck, the hiss of steam from the engines mixed with the faint vibrations of machinery, creating a constant, soothing background rhythm. Passengers leaned on rails, wrapped in blankets or shawls, gazing at the silent, endless ocean, listening to the soft symphony of movement, the unchanging pulse of the ship, and the gentle whispers of wind and water. In the cabins, everything proceeded at a calm, deliberate pace. Travelers adjusted their bedding, folded garments, and set aside letters they had been composing. The soft creak of doors, the faint scuff of shoes against carpets, and the occasional tapping of a pen against paper created a quiet cadence that echoed through the halls. The smell of soap and fresh linens mingled with the distant aroma of cooking, a gentle blend that seemed to permeate every corner of the vessel. The passengers moved slowly, deliberately, their days composed of repetitive, soothing routines, reading, writing, walking, or simply observing the motion of the waves through windows and open deck doors. Time aboard the Titanic passed almost imperceptibly. Morning became afternoon, afternoon gradually became evening, and evening faded into night, only to return again in an endless, rhythmic cycle. Each day was filled with soft movements, crew adjusting lines, engineers monitoring gauges, waiters carrying trays, passengers strolling the decks or leaning on railings. The gentle rocking of the ship, the continuous hum of engines, the distant whisper of waves, and the muted rhythm of daily life created a monotony so consistent that it seemed almost dreamlike. Even the icebergs, silently drifting in the distance, added to the slow, unchanging tempo of life at sea. Meals were repeated in quiet, measured fashion. Bread, fruit, and pastries were served slowly. Plates clinked gently against the polished tables, and conversation remained subdued. Children's soft laughter mingled with the gentle rustle of skirts and coats as passengers moved through corridors and lounges. Lanterns cast warm, soft light that danced lightly on the walls, creating elongated shadows that stretched slowly and receded just as gradually. Music continued to drift through the lounges, notes lingering and fading, repeating softly like the gentle rise and fall of the ocean itself. Below deck, the machinery continued its steady, hypnotic rhythm. The engineers checked and rechecked every valve and gauge, listening to the hum and vibrations that traveled throughout the ship. Sailors moved with measured precision, coiling ropes, inspecting pulleys, adjusting lines. Life jackets were inspected and hung carefully. Lifeboats swayed gently in the davits, and every corner of the vessel was maintained in calm, methodical order. The repetition of these tasks, day after day, created a soothing, steady cadence that resonated through every cabin, corridor, and deck. The Titanic moved forward with unhurried grace, slicing through the water in a consistent, monotone rhythm. Waves lapped softly against the hull, echoing faintly through empty corridors and vast open halls. Passengers wrote letters, read books, or simply observed the endless water and sky. The icebergs in the distance remained silent, massive, and unchanging, their slow drift almost imperceptible against the vast expanse of the Atlantic. Crew members continued their tasks with the same deliberate patience, moving quietly, inspecting every detail, attending to every minor requirement, their actions repeating endlessly in the soft, hypnotic rhythm of the ship. The RMS Titanic began as a vision for an age that celebrated size, speed, and luxury. It was conceived by the White Star Line as a passenger liner that would dominate the North Atlantic, combining unmatched scale with elegance. Work began in Belfast in 1909 at the Harland and Wolff shipyard, where engineers, designers, and thousands of laborers meticulously assembled the hull from over 3 million rivets. The keel, the spine of the ship, stretched across the dry dock like a long, silent promise of what was to come. Slowly, steel plates were fitted and rivets hammered into place with precision, while cranes carried massive sections into alignment. Overhead, scaffolds stretched for hundreds of feet, allowing workers to navigate the vast skeleton of what would soon become the world's largest ship. Titanic's designers focused on both function and comfort. The ship had 9 decks, each serving distinct purposes. The lower decks were devoted to cargo, crew quarters, and machinery. Above them were cabins for first, second, and third-class passengers, along with expansive public spaces such as dining rooms, lounges, libraries, and promenades. The ship's grand staircase, spanning multiple decks, became one of the most iconic features, its polished oak and wrought iron details symbolizing luxury and sophistication. Behind the gleaming walls and elegant finishes, miles of wiring, plumbing, and ventilation systems were installed, ensuring that every passenger would experience the highest level of comfort possible for the era. By the spring of 1912, the ship was nearing completion. Trials in Belfast Harbor allowed engineers to test the engines and boilers. Titanic's propulsion system included 29 boilers supplying steam to 3 massive propellers, designed to generate the 46,000 horsepower necessary to drive the ship at a top speed of 23 knots. Decks were cleaned and polished, furniture and artwork installed, lifeboats fitted into their davits, and life jackets inspected. Each detail was verified multiple times. Nothing was left to chance. Titanic was a floating city, a combination of advanced engineering and opulent design. The ship set sail on April 10, 1912, from Southampton, England, beginning what would be its first and only voyage across the Atlantic. Its route included stops at Cherbourg, France, and Queenstown, now Cove, Ireland, before heading toward New York. Passengers aboard the Titanic represented a cross-section of early 20th century society. First-class travelers included wealthy industrialists, socialites, and professionals seeking comfort and luxury. Second-class passengers were primarily middle-class families and professionals, enjoying ample space and fine amenities. Third-class passengers, many immigrants, traveled in more modest accommodations, dreaming of a new life in America. From the moment Titanic left port, its immense scale impressed all who watched. The ship rose above the harbor, her 4 towering funnels stretching skyward, her decks lined with people waving goodbye. On board, passengers explored their surroundings, marveling at polished woodwork, ornate furniture, and the grandeur of the dining rooms. Crew members worked quietly in the background, ensuring cabins were maintained, meals served, and operations running smoothly. Steam rose from the funnels, mixing with the salty tang of sea air as the ship glided across calm waters. For several days, Titanic's voyage proceeded without incident. The ship moved steadily through the North Atlantic, waves brushing against its hull, carrying it closer to the shores of North America. Passengers settled into routines, promenading on deck, reading, writing letters, or enjoying meals. Engineers monitored the engines, adjusting pressure and valves to maintain steady speed. Sailors kept watch, checking lines and observing the horizon. Life aboard the Titanic appeared seamless, a model of efficiency and elegance. On the night of April 14th, the ship approached a region known for icebergs. Though visibility was clear, lookouts remained vigilant. At 11:40 p.m., the Titanic struck an iceberg along its starboard side. The collision tore a series of openings in the hull, allowing water to enter compartments designed to be watertight. Titanic's builders had intended for the ship to remain afloat even with multiple compartments flooded, but the iceberg's damage exceeded these expectations. Crew members moved quickly to assess the situation, though the enormity of the event was not yet understood by passengers. Lifeboats were readied, and officers attempted to maintain calm while organizing the evacuation. Over the following hours, water continued to flood lower decks. Passengers moved into the boat deck, assisted by crew, boarding the lifeboats in an orderly manner as far as possible. The ship's wireless operators transmitted distress signals, hoping for assistance from nearby vessels. Outside, the calm Atlantic night contrasted sharply with the urgency on board. Waves lapped quietly against the steel hull while passengers and crew struggled to comprehend the unfolding disaster. Titanic's great engines ran until the final moments, sending vibrations through the decks as the ship gradually listed to one side. Shortly after 2 the ship broke apart and its forward section sank beneath the waves. The stern rose high before settling slowly into the cold, dark ocean. Lifeboats, some partially filled, floated in the water as survivors watched the ship disappear. The silence of the surrounding sea was broken only by the soft splash of water and the distant cries of those struggling in the freezing Atlantic. Rescue ships arrived hours later, recovering those who had survived the night. The legacy of Titanic endured long after the ship sank. Investigations in both the United States and the United Kingdom examined the causes of the disaster, the decisions made by the crew, and the design limitations of the ship. Books, articles, and documentaries preserved the memory of Titanic, recounting stories of heroism, tragedy, and human ambition. The wreck itself was discovered decades later, lying in two main sections at the bottom of the Atlantic, a testament to the ship's size and the enormity of the event. Titanic remains one of history's most studied maritime disasters, a symbol of technological achievement, human error, and the unpredictable forces of nature. Its story continues to fascinate, reminding the world of the delicate balance between ambition and humility, between engineering and the unpredictable power of the sea. From the shipyards of Belfast to the depths of the North Atlantic, Titanic's journey endures a long, detailed chronicle of a vessel that sought to connect continents' lives and destinies, and the quiet, inevitable rhythm of the ocean that claimed it. The RMS Titanic was a British passenger liner built by the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, Ireland, beginning in 1909. Commissioned by the White Star Line, the ship was intended to be the largest and most luxurious vessel afloat. It measured approximately 882 feet in length, 92 feet in width, and was equipped with 9 decks. Titanic's design emphasized both luxury and safety. It had 16 watertight compartments, with doors that could close automatically, theoretically making the ship unsinkable. Its construction employed over 3 million rivets and thousands of tons of steel, reflecting the ambition and engineering capabilities of the early 20th century. Titanic's maiden voyage began on April 10, 1912. She departed Southampton, England, with scheduled stops at Cherbourg, France, and Queenstown, modern-day Cove, Ireland, before heading across the Atlantic to New York City. On board were more than 2,200 people, including passengers and crew. The passengers represented a wide cross-section of society: wealthy businessmen, socialites, and aristocrats in first class, middle-class families and professionals in second class, and immigrants in third class, many traveling to the United States in search of new opportunities. The ship's facilities were remarkable for their time. First-class passengers enjoyed a grand dining saloon, a gymnasium, a swimming pool, reading rooms, and promenades with panoramic ocean views. Second-class accommodations included well-furnished cabins and shared spaces suitable for middle-class travelers. Third-class passengers, often referred to as steerage, were provided basic but functional cabins and common areas. Crew members were responsible for navigating the ship, serving meals, maintaining engines and boilers, and ensuring the safety and comfort of all on board. For the first 4 days, Titanic's voyage proceeded without incident. The weather was generally calm and passengers settled into routines, walking on deck, enjoying meals, reading, and writing letters. The ship's wireless operators transmitted routine messages between ships and to shore stations. Engineers monitored the operation of the ship's 3 propellers powered by steam from 29 boilers, while sailors maintained rigging deck equipment and the lifeboats, which had been carefully inspected but were insufficient in number for all on board in accordance with outdated maritime regulations. On the evening of April 14, 1912, the ship entered a region of the North Atlantic known for icebergs. Visibility was clear but cold, and the lookout team was stationed high in the crow's nest. At 11:40 p.m., Titanic struck an iceberg along the starboard side, which tore open several compartments below the waterline. Water began to flood the forward compartments. Although Titanic's designers had intended for the ship to stay afloat with a limited number of compartments breached, the iceberg's damage extended beyond this limit. The ship began to list and gradually fill with water. The crew responded by assessing the damage and preparing lifeboats for evacuation. Officers instructed passengers to don life jackets and proceed to the boat deck. Many first-class passengers were initially reluctant, believing the ship to be unsinkable, while crew members worked to maintain order. The wireless operators sent distress signals, which were received by nearby ships, including the Carpathia, which began navigating toward Titanic's location. Between 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock on April 15th, lifeboats were lowered with as many passengers as possible. Titanic's bow continued to sink, and the ship's stern began to rise sharply before the vessel broke apart. The forward section disappeared beneath the waves first, followed by the stern, which settled more slowly into the cold Atlantic. More than 1,500 passengers and crew perished, while approximately 700 survived. Many rescued from lifeboats by the Carpathia in the early morning hours. The disaster prompted widespread international scrutiny. Investigations in the United States and the United Kingdom examined safety procedures, lifeboat regulations, crew training, and ship design. The inquiries highlighted shortcomings in maritime laws and emergency preparedness, leading to new international conventions regarding lifeboat requirements, wireless communications, and iceberg monitoring. The wreck of the Titanic was discovered in 1985, nearly 73 years after it sank, lying in 2 primary sections about 12,500 feet below the surface. Exploration of the wreck provided further insight into the ship's construction, the extent of the iceberg damage, and the conditions leading to its sinking. Artifacts recovered from the site are displayed in museums worldwide, preserving the memory of the passengers and crew. Titanic's story remains one of the most well-documented maritime disasters in history, symbolizing both human ambition and the vulnerability of even the most advanced technology to nature. The combination of meticulous planning, luxury, and tragic oversight has made Titanic a subject of enduring historical study, fascination, and remembrance, representing a cautionary tale of engineering, regulation, and human experience at the dawn of the 20th century. Construction of the Titanic began in March 1909 at the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, under the supervision of chief designer Thomas Andrews. The ship was built on slipway number 2, using steel plates and girders that were custom fabricated for the enormous structure. Harland and Wolff employed thousands of workers, including riveters, welders, carpenters, and electricians. The ship's framework was laid carefully, each steel plate fitted precisely to form the hull. The keel, nearly 882 feet long, acted as the central spine, and the ship's ribs were assembled around it, creating the skeletal structure that would later support 9 decks. Shipyard records indicate that over 3 million rivets were used, with teams heating them red hot before hammering them into place. The Titanic was designed with 4 funnels, although only 3 were functional. The 4th was added for aesthetic balance and ventilation. The ship's twin rudders allowed for precise navigation, and the triple-screw propulsion system was powered by 29 boilers, supplying steam to 2 reciprocating engines and a central turbine. The boiler rooms were labyrinthine, with coal-fired manually by stokers working in extreme heat and darkness, often spending 12-hour shifts. The engine rooms were a marvel of early 20th century engineering, with thousands of pipes, gauges, and valves all requiring careful monitoring to ensure smooth operation. Titanic's interior design reflected a mix of Edwardian elegance and the modern conveniences of the time. First-class accommodations included private suites with en-suite bathrooms, intricately carved wood paneling, and plush furniture. The first-class dining saloon could seat over 500 passengers and featured ornate chandeliers, decorative plasterwork, and polished oak floors. Second-class areas were more modest but comfortable, with well-appointed cabins and communal spaces. Third-class accommodations, although simple, were well ventilated, with dormitory-style sleeping quarters and dining rooms designed to accommodate hundreds of passengers. After extensive trials, Titanic was declared seaworthy, and on April 10, 1912, she embarked on her maiden voyage from Southampton. Her departure was attended by a crowd of spectators who watched the massive ship glide out of the harbor, propelled by a steady combination of steam and manpower. During the initial days at sea, the ship's crew performed routine checks and drills, ensuring that all systems functioned correctly. Passengers explored the decks and public areas, observed the horizon, and became accustomed to the ship's movements. The wireless operators maintained communication with other ships and shore stations, sending routine messages and weather reports. Engineers and stokers maintained a continuous schedule, feeding coal into the furnaces and regulating steam pressure to ensure that the ship maintained its planned speed. On April 14th, Titanic entered waters known for icebergs. Despite warnings from other vessels, the ship maintained near maximum speed. At 11:40 p.m., Lookout Frederick Fleet spotted an iceberg directly ahead. The officers attempted to maneuver the ship to avoid collision, but the iceberg scraped along the starboard side, opening several of the ship's watertight compartments to the sea. Initial assessments underestimated the severity of the breach, and the ship began to take on water faster than anticipated. Captain Edward Smith and the senior officers initiated evacuation procedures, sending passengers to the boat deck. Lifeboats, however, were insufficient for the number of people on board, in accordance with outdated maritime regulations. The crew prioritized loading women and children first, and the order of evacuation was maintained as much as possible amid growing urgency. Wireless operators transmitted distress calls to nearby vessels, including the RMS Carpathia, which immediately altered course to assist. Between midnight and 2:20 a.m., the ship's condition deteriorated. The bow section continued to submerge, forcing more passengers and crew to the upper decks. The hull's structural integrity failed, and the vessel broke into 2 main sections. The forward portion sank rapidly, while the stern settled more slowly before disappearing beneath the cold Atlantic waters. Many passengers were unable to reach lifeboats and perished, while others clung to debris or floated in the freezing sea until rescue ships arrived. Approximately 1,500 people died, making the Titanic disaster one of the deadliest maritime accidents in history. Subsequent investigations in the United States and United Kingdom examined the events leading to the sinking. These inquiries focused on the ship's design, lifeboat capacity, wireless communication practices, and the actions of the captain and officers. Findings revealed systemic deficiencies in maritime safety standards, resulting in major reforms, including lifeboat regulations, iceberg patrol systems, and mandatory continuous wireless communication on passenger ships. The Titanic wreck was discovered in 1985 by Robert Ballard and his team, lying in 2 main sections on the Atlantic seafloor approximately 12,500 feet below the surface. The site revealed extensive damage to the hull, artifacts scattered across the ocean bed, and insight into the ship's final moments. Recovery efforts over subsequent decades retrieved objects ranging from china and personal belongings to structural components, all meticulously documented and preserved. Today, Titanic remains a symbol of early 20th century engineering, luxury, and human ambition, but also of the vulnerabilities inherent in even the most advanced technological achievements. Its story continues to be studied extensively, with each artifact, document, and personal account contributing to the historical record of the ship, its passengers, and the lessons learned from one of history's most famous maritime tragedies. Before her launch, Titanic underwent extensive outfitting and sea trials to ensure all systems were operational. Electrical systems were installed, including lighting throughout the decks, and wireless telegraphy equipment, which allowed for near-instantaneous communication across the Atlantic. Hydraulic systems powered the ship's watertight doors and elevators, which were among the most advanced in the world at the time. Crew members trained extensively with these systems, including emergency drills for lifeboat deployment. Although there was limited precedent for evacuating such a large vessel at sea, the ship's construction reflected a deliberate balance between speed, luxury, and safety. Hull plates were made of high-quality steel, while bulkheads were reinforced to improve compartmentalization. Despite these features, safety regulations of the era did not anticipate the rapid flooding caused by a series of compromised compartments. Titanic's design included watertight compartments intended to remain above water if up to 4 were breached. Yet the iceberg tore along 6 compartments, rendering the design insufficient. Titanic carried a mixture of mail, cargo, and passengers. The lower decks stored goods ranging from coal and mail bags to personal luggage of emigrants traveling to the United States. Crew members were responsible for inventory management, securing cargo, and maintaining ventilation and access routes. Engineers monitored boiler pressure and fuel consumption closely, coordinating with stokers to maintain optimal speed and prevent mechanical failure. Fuel consumption was staggering. Approximately 600 tons of coal were burned each day to power the engines and maintain steam pressure. Throughout the voyage, the ship's bridge maintained navigational vigilance. Officers monitored charts, consulted iceberg warnings from other vessels, and maintained a course calculated to minimize risk. Lookouts were stationed in the crow's nest, scanning for obstacles. The wireless operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, remained on duty almost continuously, transmitting passenger messages and receiving navigational information. Despite multiple iceberg warnings from nearby ships, Titanic continued at near maximum speed, reflecting the White Star Line's emphasis on punctual transatlantic crossings. The night of April 14, 1912, was unusually calm with a clear sky and no moonlight, conditions which made it harder to spot icebergs. When Frederick Fleet first saw the iceberg ahead, the bridge officers attempted a hard turn to starboard while reversing the engines, but the maneuver was insufficient to prevent the collision. The iceberg scraped along the hull, opening 6 compartments to water. The ship's bow began to settle, and the forward decks were progressively submerged. In response, Captain Edward Smith and the officers implemented evacuation procedures. First-class women and children were prioritized, followed by second- and third-class passengers as conditions allowed. The lifeboat loading was disorganized at times due to unfamiliarity with protocols and the unexpected scale of the emergency. Some lifeboats were launched partially empty, reflecting a lack of training and confidence in the necessity of full capacity. Crew members assisted passengers, maintained calm where possible, and coordinated with the wireless operators to signal for assistance. The wireless distress calls were picked up by nearby ships, including the RMS Carpathia, commanded by Captain Arthur Rostron. Carpathia navigated through ice fields at maximum speed, arriving hours later to recover survivors. Lifeboats floated in the frigid water, some containing families, others individuals who had managed to escape the sinking ship. Exposure to the cold, rough seas was deadly. Hypothermia claimed many who were unable to reach rescue vessels quickly. Titanic broke apart between 2:15 and 2:20 a.m. The stern section rose dramatically before slowly sinking. Structural failure in the midsection caused the ship to fracture completely, separating bow and stern. Objects from the ship, including furniture, personal belongings, and cargo, were swept into the water. Survivors recalled a mixture of chaos, bravery, and tragedy as they awaited rescue. Lifeboats were rowed to distance from the sinking vessel to avoid being pulled under by suction. Post-disaster investigations revealed systemic issues in maritime operations of the time. The United States Senate and British Board of Trade conducted inquiries that highlighted deficiencies in lifeboat requirements, wireless communication policies, and iceberg monitoring. New regulations required that ships carry lifeboats for all passengers, maintain 24-hour wireless operations, and follow strict iceberg watch procedures, fundamentally changing maritime safety standards. The Titanic wreck was discovered on September 1, 1985, by a joint American-French expedition led by oceanographer Robert Ballard. The ship was found approximately 12,500 feet below the ocean surface, with the bow and stern sections separated by about 2,000 feet. Exploration revealed structural deterioration, hull plate buckling, and debris fields including personal effects, mechanical equipment, and parts of the superstructure. Recovery and preservation of artifacts allowed historians to document aspects of Titanic's construction, passenger life, and the sequence of events leading to her sinking. The disaster remains a defining moment in maritime history, illustrating both human ingenuity and the limits of technological confidence. Titanic's legacy is preserved through museums, scholarly research, and public memory, serving as a detailed case study of early 20th century shipbuilding, navigation practices, and social structures aboard ocean liners. Its story continues to be taught, studied, and remembered for its lessons in engineering, safety, and human experience. Titanic's maiden voyage included over 1,000 crew members, each with a defined role to ensure the smooth operation of the ship. The crew was divided into officers, deckhands, engineers, stewards, galley staff, and specialized personnel such as electricians and wireless operators. Officers were responsible for navigation and supervision, while deckhands handled maintenance of the ship's exterior, rigging, and lifeboats. Engineers and firemen maintained boiler operations, often working in extreme heat for long shifts, feeding coal into furnaces to generate the steam necessary to drive the engines. Stewards attended to passenger cabins, dining services, and public areas, ensuring comfort and adherence to standards of the White Star Line. The wireless room played a critical role in passenger communication and ship operations. Jack Phillips and Harold Bride operated a Marconi wireless transmitter, which allowed passengers to send personal messages to family and businesses while also receiving navigational warnings. On April 14th, multiple ice warnings were received from nearby vessels, including the SS Californian. However, due to a combination of signal overload and prioritization of passenger messages, the iceberg warnings were not immediately acted upon, leaving Titanic on a collision course through a heavily iced region. Titanic carried mail, packages, and commercial cargo in addition to passengers. The ship had a dedicated mailroom located on the lower decks, staffed by postal clerks who sorted and organized incoming and outgoing mail. Cargo storage included a variety of goods, ranging from textiles to household items, much of it intended for delivery in New York. The meticulous arrangement of cargo was essential not only for organization, but also to maintain the ship's balance and stability. On board, passengers from different classes experienced markedly different conditions. First-class passengers enjoyed access to luxurious amenities such as a Turkish bath, electric elevators, and a squash court. Second-class accommodations, while simpler, included private cabins and communal lounges. Third-class passengers lived in more densely arranged dormitories, yet they were provided sufficient ventilation, dining spaces, and access to deck promenades. Many third-class passengers were immigrants, traveling with limited funds but full of hope for life in the United States. Their cabins were located in the lower sections of the ship, separated from the luxury decks above by structural bulkheads and staircases. The night of April 14, 1912, unfolded quietly until the iceberg collision. The weather was calm, with clear skies and almost no wind, which made icebergs difficult to detect. The lookout spotted the iceberg ahead at approximately 11:40 p.m., giving the officers minimal time to react. The ship's turning radius and momentum were insufficient to avoid contact, and the iceberg scraped along the starboard hull, compromising 6 watertight compartments. The ship's pumps could not keep up with the incoming water, and the forward decks began to list as water spread. Following the collision, Captain Edward Smith ordered the lifeboats to be prepared. Crew members and officers began evacuating passengers in an organized manner where possible. Though challenges arose due to the layout of the decks, lack of lifeboat drills for passengers, and language barriers among third-class travelers. Many lifeboats were lowered before reaching full capacity, and some passengers initially refused to leave, trusting the vessel's reputation for safety. Despite the chaos, crew members assisted boarding, lowered lifeboats carefully, and worked to prevent panic from spreading. Titanic's structural design influenced the progression of the sinking. The ship was divided into 16 watertight compartments, but the iceberg damage allowed water to spill from one compartment to the next, overwhelming the design's capacity. As water filled the forward compartments, the ship's bow sank progressively, pulling the stern upward. The vessel eventually broke apart between the third and fourth funnels. The bow section sank first, disappearing beneath the Atlantic waters, followed by the stern, which settled slowly before vanishing completely. Survivors faced harsh conditions in lifeboats and the freezing water. The North Atlantic temperature that night was below 28 degrees Fahrenheit, 2 degrees Celsius, and hypothermia claimed the lives of many who could not maintain buoyancy or reach rescue vessels quickly. Lifeboats were rowed away from the sinking ship to avoid suction, and passengers in the boats attempted to stay warm by huddling together and using blankets when available. The RMS Carpathia arrived hours later, responding to Titanic's distress signals. Captain Arthur Rostron directed his ship through ice-laden waters, rescuing survivors from lifeboats and debris. The Carpathia's crew provided blankets, food, and medical care while navigating back toward New York. Approximately 705 survivors were rescued, while over 1,500 perished. After the disaster, inquiries in both the United States and the United Kingdom led to sweeping reforms in maritime safety. Investigations revealed that lifeboat capacity regulations were outdated, wireless communication was not consistently monitored, and iceberg warnings were inadequately acted upon. New laws required all passenger ships to carry enough lifeboats for everyone aboard, maintain continuous wireless operation, and establish international ice patrols to warn ships of dangerous conditions. The Titanic wreck was discovered on September 1, 1985, in the North Atlantic at a depth of about 12,500 feet, 3,800 meters. Exploration of the wreck revealed two main sections, debris fields, and personal artifacts that provided new insight into the ship's construction, passenger experiences, and the final moments of the sinking. Structural examination showed that rivets failed along the hull plates, contributing to the rapid flooding. Artifacts recovered, including dishes, furniture, and personal belongings, were carefully cataloged and are now displayed in museums worldwide. Titanic's legacy endures as a cautionary tale and historical study. The disaster highlighted the limits of early 20th century engineering and the importance of safety regulations. Its story remains widely studied in maritime history, engineering, and social history, illustrating both the opulence of luxury liners and the human cost of overconfidence in technology. Titanic's launch on May 31, 1911, was a milestone of naval engineering and drew thousands of spectators to Belfast. Women and children were invited to witness the ceremony, and a bottle of champagne was traditionally smashed against the bow by Lady Lucy Duff Gordon, marking the ship's official introduction to water. After the hull slid into the river, fitting out continued with installation of interior furnishings, engines, and advanced electrical systems. Carpentry teams assembled fine wood paneling, staircases, and decorative moldings in the first-class areas, while electricians worked to wire hundreds of cabins and public spaces for lighting and communication. The ship's kitchens and galleys were massive operations in themselves. Titanic's culinary staff was composed of more than 70 cooks, bakers, and kitchen assistants preparing meals for thousands daily. Equipment included multiple ranges, stoves, ovens, and ice storage rooms for preserving fresh ingredients. Meal planning adhered to strict schedules, with menus tailored to the preferences of first, second, and third-class passengers. Luxury foods, including fresh seafood, imported meats, and seasonal fruits, were sourced from Europe and stored in refrigerated compartments using ammonia-based ice machines, cutting-edge technology at the time. Titanic's lifeboat design was another feature of careful planning, though ultimately inadequate. Lifeboats were constructed of mahogany with double-planked hulls and were equipped with oars, ropes, and basic provisions such as water and rations. Crew members trained to launch lifeboats efficiently, practicing the use of davits and lowering mechanisms. Despite the innovation, maritime regulations required lifeboats for only about half the ship's capacity. Officers assumed that in the unlikely event of a disaster, passengers could be transferred to rescue ships quickly. Titanic's public spaces were a reflection of Edwardian social hierarchy. First-class areas included the grand staircase, the smoking room, and a reading and writing room. Each space was decorated with motifs from different historical styles, including Georgian, Louis XVI, and Rococo influences. In contrast, second-class areas offered simpler elegance, with lounges and dining rooms designed for comfort rather than display. Third-class communal areas focused on functionality, providing shared dining halls, seating, and access to open decks where passengers could observe the ocean. The ship's journey toward New York was carefully timed, with officers monitoring the compass, celestial navigation, and known shipping routes. Titanic's bridge had advanced navigational instruments, including a gyrocompass, sextant, and chronometers, which allowed precise calculation of latitude and longitude. Officers monitored engine performance and coordinated with the engine room to maintain steady speed, ensuring arrival within the advertised schedule. Crew hierarchy played a critical role in maintaining order during the voyage. Chief Officer Henry Wilde oversaw deck operations, assisted by a team of officers responsible for lookout duties, lifeboat preparation, and passenger supervision. Below decks, Chief Engineer Joseph Bell managed the mechanical and boiler rooms, ensuring continuous operation of the ship's engines. The hierarchy allowed responsibilities to be divided efficiently, though the unforeseen iceberg collision would ultimately test the chain of command under extreme stress. Third-class passengers often traveled under challenging conditions despite the overall standards of Titanic. Many emigrants journeying to North America endured long waits in crowded dining and sleeping areas. Access to upper decks was limited, and staircases connecting lower and upper levels were monitored to maintain separation between classes. Despite these restrictions, passengers organized social activities such as card games, informal gatherings, and communal meals, creating a sense of community among travelers seeking new opportunities in America. On the morning of April 14th, Titanic's crew performed routine checks on engines, boilers, and hull integrity. Engineers inspected boilers and pressure gauges, ensuring that coal was being burned efficiently and that steam was delivered evenly to all three propellers. Deck officers monitored the horizon and navigational charts, while wireless operators transmitted routine messages regarding passenger correspondence. At this stage, Titanic was approaching a region known for drifting ice, and while previous ice warnings had been received, the standard operating practice allowed the ship to maintain high speed in the absence of immediate visual hazards. The ship's communication system, a Marconi wireless, was used extensively to transmit passenger telegrams. Messages ranged from business correspondence to personal greetings, with operators working in shifts to manage constant traffic. The importance of these communications grew as Titanic navigated the Atlantic, with incoming ice warnings arriving alongside routine messages. Operators prioritized passenger communications over navigational warnings, a factor that contributed to the delay in responding to iceberg alerts. The iceberg collision at 11:40 p.m. on April 14th marked a turning point in Titanic's voyage. The ship's hull was compromised, allowing water to enter multiple forward compartments. Crew members quickly assessed the damage and initiated emergency procedures. Officers and stewards guided passengers toward lifeboat stations while maintaining calm as much as possible. Lifeboats were prepared, lowered, and provisioned, but the capacity limitations meant that many could not be accommodated. The forward decks began to flood, and structural stress caused progressive bending of bulkheads, contributing to the eventual breakup of the ship. Titanic's design also reflected a commitment to passenger comfort and advanced engineering. The ship included multiple freshwater tanks and a filtration system that allowed drinking water to be pumped throughout the vessel. Electrical lighting replaced the traditional gas lamps, providing more reliable illumination for corridors, cabins, and public spaces. The ship's ventilation system included electric fans that circulated air through first, second, and third-class cabins, helping to reduce the damp, humid conditions that often plagued transatlantic voyages. Crew training extended beyond mechanical operations. Officers and seamen drilled repeatedly in lifeboat lowering and emergency procedures, although these drills rarely included passengers. Stewards were trained in etiquette and hospitality, attending to passengers' meals, room service, and comfort. Culinary staff learned to coordinate the preparation of thousands of meals, adjusting for class distinctions and dietary preferences. Ship's doctors and nurses were prepared to manage minor illnesses and injuries. But Titanic carried no advanced hospital beyond basic treatment rooms, reflecting the medical standards of the time. The ship's hull was coated with a layer of anti-fouling paint to reduce drag and improve speed. Titanic's propellers were among the largest ever built, designed to maximize efficiency while minimizing vibrations. The central turbine engine, paired with two reciprocating engines, allowed the vessel to reach speeds exceeding 21 knots during trials. The design was tested under load, with simulated passengers and cargo, to ensure the ship would handle transatlantic conditions safely. Titanic's passenger registration included extensive documentation. First-class passengers often carried passports and detailed itineraries, while third-class passengers, primarily immigrants, submitted minimal paperwork, frequently including names, origins, and intended destinations. Crew members were documented in official rosters with roles, ranks, and emergency responsibilities clearly outlined. This organizational structure was intended to streamline operations and provide accountability, though it proved challenging during the sudden crisis of the iceberg collision. The wireless room included multiple sets of equipment, a spark gap transmitter, batteries, and a receiver. The system required operators to monitor frequencies continuously, balancing passenger telegrams with ship-to-ship messages. Wireless signals had a limited range, but Titanic's operators could communicate with stations hundreds of miles away. Despite these capabilities, human error and prioritization decisions meant that some iceberg warnings were delayed in reaching the bridge, highlighting limitations in operational protocols of the era. Life aboard Titanic before the disaster followed a rigid schedule. First-class passengers attended formal dinners in large dining saloons, often lasting several hours, with multiple courses and meticulously timed service. Afternoon teas, evening dances, and social gatherings filled the public spaces. Second-class passengers enjoyed recreational lounges, reading rooms, and deck promenades. Third-class passengers gathered in communal dining areas and on open deck spaces, engaging in card games, storytelling, and informal performances to pass the time during the voyage. The ship's safety features included watertight doors, double-bottom hull plates, and compartmentalization designed to limit flooding. Bulkhead doors were operated manually or by hydraulic systems, allowing rapid closure in emergencies. Despite these features, the design could not prevent progressive flooding when multiple forward compartments were breached. Lifeboat davits were placed along the ship's deck, each capable of lowering boats efficiently under trained supervision, though they could not accommodate every passenger. Titanic's final departure from Queenstown, Ireland, added additional passengers and mail. Third-class travelers often carried few possessions, anticipating new lives in America. Officers briefed passengers on the ship's schedule and routes, while engineers adjusted engine output for optimal fuel efficiency and speed. Deck officers continued monitoring navigational charts, compass headings, and the sparse iceberg field ahead, using a combination of celestial and dead reckoning methods common to early 20th century maritime navigation. April 14, 1912, brought unusual calm seas. The temperature of the North Atlantic was just below freezing, and the night was moonless, reducing visibility of ice hazards. Lookouts stationed high in the crow's nest used binoculars to scan for obstacles, while officers on the bridge monitored warnings from other ships via wireless messages. At 11:40 p.m., Frederick Fleet sighted an iceberg directly ahead. Despite immediate evasive maneuvers, the ship's speed and momentum prevented full avoidance. The iceberg tore along the starboard hull, opening multiple compartments to the sea. Titanic's forward decks began to list as flooding spread, initiating the chain of events that would lead to the ship breaking apart. Titanic's communication protocols were supported by a small team of shipboard officers and clerks who coordinated incoming and outgoing messages. Telegrams from passengers were coded, sorted, and relayed to the wireless room, where operators transmitted them via Morse code to land-based stations. The system allowed messages to reach Europe and North America within hours, an impressive advancement for the era. In addition to passenger correspondence, the wireless system was integral for navigational coordination with other ships, including ice reports, weather forecasts, and schedules for mail deliveries. The ship's heating system was another technological feature rarely seen at the time. Hot water radiators and steam pipes provided climate control within cabins and public spaces. Engine-generated steam was diverted to the heating network, while thermostatic controls allowed adjustment of temperature in selected areas. The system maintained comfort for passengers across all classes. Even during the sub-zero temperatures of the North Atlantic in April, Titanic also included advanced sanitation facilities. Bathrooms and toilets were connected to a complex system of pumps and pipes that removed waste to storage tanks. Crew members maintained strict hygiene protocols, particularly in the galleys, medical areas, and third-class sections, to prevent disease outbreaks during the transatlantic voyage. Water closets and sinks were regularly inspected, and fresh water was continuously supplied from onboard tanks filtered from steam condensation and river-made water supplies, ensuring safe drinking water for passengers and crew. The ship's medical provisions included a surgery room, a small dispensary, and a team of medical officers and nurses. Routine checkups, minor treatments, and emergency care were provided on board. Surgeons carried surgical instruments, bandages, and medicines appropriate for common illnesses and injuries. Despite these facilities, the scale of the disaster quickly overwhelmed any onboard medical capabilities once the iceberg collision occurred, highlighting limitations in early 20th century maritime health planning. Titanic carried a detailed catalog of lifeboat placement and loading procedures. Officers were assigned to specific boats and assigned roles such as coxswain, oarsman, and lookouts. Each boat was stocked with basic survival supplies including water, biscuits, flares, and ropes. The design of davits allowed the boats to be swung over the side and lowered even under partial weight, though the system had never been tested with a full complement of passengers, leaving practical limitations unproven. During the voyage, third-class passengers often maintained cultural and social traditions from their home countries. Many spoke multiple languages, sang folk songs, and engaged in group prayers or religious observances. This created small communities within the ship, providing social support and emotional resilience during the crossing. Crew members interacted with third-class passengers primarily during meal distribution, maintenance, and emergency drills, and language barriers sometimes limited communication, complicating evacuation procedures during the disaster. Titanic's galley operations were organized into shifts to ensure continuous meal service. First-class meals involved multiple courses including soups, fish, meats, vegetables, and desserts. Menus were planned weeks in advance to account for the duration of the voyage and the availability of fresh ingredients. Second and third-class meals were simpler but nutritionally sufficient. Bakeries produced bread, pastries, and biscuits daily, and ice storage ensured perishable items remained fresh throughout the crossing. The ship's stability relied on precise weight distribution of coal, cargo, and passenger accommodations. Ballast tanks allowed adjustments to maintain proper trim, and crew members monitored shifting cargo and water ingress during the voyage. Engineers calculated the fuel consumption carefully, ensuring that the boilers maintained consistent steam pressure while avoiding overloading the engines. This balance of weight, steam, and hull integrity was critical for Titanic's performance, especially in potentially hazardous North Atlantic waters. On April 14th, icebergs were reported by nearby vessels, including the Californian and the Coronia. Officers on the bridge debated course adjustments, but standard practice at the time often prioritized maintaining speed over minor course deviations. Visibility was limited by the calm sea and the absence of moonlight, making ice detection extremely difficult. Despite these challenges, lookouts remained stationed high in the crow's nest, scanning the horizon with binoculars provided by the captain. At 11:40 p.m., The iceberg was sighted. The collision tore open the hull along a 300-foot stretch, allowing water to enter 6 forward compartments. The ship's watertight doors slowed the flooding in isolated areas, but could not contain the volume of water entering the vessel. The bow began to settle, gradually lowering the forward decks into the ocean. Officers began implementing lifeboat procedures, and crew members guided passengers to embarkation points. Panic was minimal initially, as many passengers underestimated the severity of the situation. Titanic's navigational strategy relied on a combination of traditional seamanship and early 20th century technology. Officers used compasses, charts, and chronometers to calculate the ship's position relative to the intended course. Celestial navigation was employed when visibility allowed, using sextants to measure angles between celestial bodies and the horizon. These calculations were cross-referenced with dead reckoning, which estimated position based on speed, time, and direction. This layered approach was standard practice, but still vulnerable to errors, especially in iceberg-laden waters. The ship's dining and social schedules were meticulously organized. First-class passengers had assigned seating for meals, which rotated daily to encourage social interaction. Afternoon tea, evening dances, and concerts were held in lounges, ballrooms, and reading rooms. Entertainment staff, including pianists, violinists, and singers, performed daily, creating a refined atmosphere. Second-class passengers enjoyed communal gatherings and literary societies, while third-class passengers often organized informal musical sessions, storytelling, and games on open deck spaces. These activities fostered a sense of camaraderie, particularly among families and immigrant groups traveling together. Titanic's cargo hold contained not only mail and personal luggage, but also commercial goods such as textiles, machinery parts, and foodstuffs. Cargo was secured using wooden beams, ropes, and metal fasteners to prevent shifting during the voyage. Proper stowage was essential for maintaining the ship's stability, as uneven distribution could affect trim and steering. Crew members regularly inspected cargo areas to ensure items remained in place, and additional ballast adjustments were made when necessary to compensate for weight changes as coal was consumed. The ship's heating, ventilation, and plumbing systems required constant oversight. Steam from the boilers circulated through radiators, providing warmth to passenger cabins. Electric fans aided air circulation, reducing humidity in lower decks. Fresh water was stored in large tanks, filtered and pumped to bathrooms, kitchens, and drinking fountains. Crew members routinely tested water quality, repaired leaks, and maintained pumps to prevent malfunctions. These systems contributed to passenger comfort, particularly on the long voyage across cold North Atlantic waters. Titanic's lifeboat drills prior to departure were limited and primarily conducted among crew members. Officers instructed lifeboat teams on lowering procedures or handling and coordination under emergency conditions. Passengers, however, received minimal training, and some were unaware of lifeboat locations or boarding procedures. The design of the davits allowed lifeboats to be swung out over the side, lowered using manual winches, and loaded with passengers. Each lifeboat had capacity for 65 people, yet the total number of lifeboats could accommodate only about half of those on board. The iceberg collision caused rapid flooding, which was compounded by the movement of water across interconnected compartments. Bulkheads, designed to limit water spread, were ineffective once multiple sections were breached. The forward decks gradually sank and structural strain began to fracture internal supports. Crew members monitored the rate of flooding and directed passengers to higher decks. Officers attempted to maintain order, while wireless operators transmitted distress signals to nearby ships, detailing coordinates, passenger numbers, and the urgency of the emergency. Third-class passengers faced unique challenges during evacuation. Stairways connecting lower decks to lifeboat stations were monitored by crew members, often separating passengers by class. Language barriers and unfamiliarity with the ship's layout made it difficult for some passengers to reach safety. Many relied on the assistance of stewards or fellow travelers, while others became trapped in corridors or crowded areas. The social stratification of the ship influenced the evacuation process, contributing to a disproportionate loss of life among lower deck passengers. Titanic's bow sank progressively, pulling the ship downward and causing the stern to rise. Structural failure eventually caused the ship to break into two main sections. The bow submerged rapidly, crushing internal compartments, while the stern remained partially afloat for several minutes before succumbing to flooding and capsizing. The breakup scattered debris, cargo, and personal belongings across the ocean surface. Survivors clung to floating objects, lifeboats, or makeshift rafts, enduring hypothermic conditions in near-freezing water. The RMS Carpathia arrived several hours after the distress signals were sent. Captain Arthur Rostron navigated through ice-laden waters at full speed, using searchlights and binoculars to locate lifeboats and survivors. Carpathia's crew provided blankets, hot food, and medical attention to those rescued. Approximately 705 survivors were recovered, representing a fraction of the more than 2,200 people aboard Titanic. Many survivors endured shock, frostbite, and trauma from the loss of family members and fellow passengers. Investigations into the disaster revealed systemic issues in ship design, maritime regulations, and emergency preparedness. The United States Senate and British Board of Trade conducted inquiries focusing on lifeboat capacity, crew training, wireless operations, and decision-making by officers. Reforms mandated sufficient lifeboats for all passengers, continuous wireless watch, and the establishment of international ice patrols to monitor iceberg fields. These changes improved maritime safety and shaped modern shipping practices. Titanic's electrical systems were among the most sophisticated of any ship in 1912. The vessel carried multiple generators that supplied electricity for lighting, communication, and auxiliary machinery. Engineers regularly inspected generators, wiring, and circuit breakers to prevent failures. Electrical lighting was installed throughout corridors, stairwells, cabins, and public rooms, replacing gas lamps and allowing safer nighttime navigation on deck. Elevators powered by electric motors operated in first and second class sections, a rare feature for transatlantic liners of the era. The ship also had a pneumatic signaling system linking crew stations, which allowed officers to relay orders quickly between the bridge, engine rooms, and key decks. Telegraph tubes and bells were installed to signal emergencies or coordinate maintenance. This system enhanced efficiency but relied entirely on human response to mechanical signals, which proved insufficient during the sudden chaos of the iceberg collision. Titanic's ventilation system was divided by class to maintain comfort across different passenger areas. Fresh air was drawn from deck intakes, filtered through rudimentary screens, and distributed via fans to cabins and public spaces. Heating coils carried steam from the boilers to maintain warmth, while air shafts allowed circulation throughout enclosed areas. Third-class passengers, located on lower decks, benefited from improved airflow compared to older ships, reducing illness and discomfort during the crossing. Crew quarters were arranged below deck in proximity to work areas. Firemen and stokers lived in bunk rooms adjacent to boiler rooms, enduring intense heat, soot, and vibration. Stewards and service staff had separate dormitories near dining and service areas. Officers maintained private cabins near the bridge, allowing them immediate access to critical operations. Crew members rotated shifts to manage engines, maintenance, and passenger services continuously during the voyage. Titanic carried a wide range of cargo, including industrial machinery, raw materials, and delicate goods. Cargo manifests documented each item, and specialized storage areas preserved fragile or perishable shipments. Refrigerated holds used brine and ammonia-based cooling to store meats, fish, and dairy products. Crew regularly checked cargo integrity, ensuring that items remained secured and that weight distribution maintained the ship's stability. Passenger correspondence was an integral part of Titanic's operation. Wireless operators transmitted thousands of personal messages between passengers and shore stations. These messages included business communications, travel updates, and greetings to family abroad. The volume of traffic sometimes delayed the reception of navigational warnings, revealing a tension between passenger convenience and operational safety in early wireless protocols. During the voyage, the ship's orchestra rehearsed daily in preparation for performances in first-class lounges and dining rooms. Music ranged from light classical pieces to popular waltzes, intended to provide entertainment and maintain a refined atmosphere. Second-class passengers occasionally attended informal concerts, while third-class travelers organized their own music sessions on open decks. These cultural practices offered passengers distraction, social engagement, and comfort during the crossing. On the day of the collision, Titanic's crew monitored ice reports and observed visual signs of icebergs. Lookouts in the crow's nest had binoculars, though some observers later reported they were not always available due to storage practices. The calm seas and absence of moonlight created conditions in which icebergs were difficult to detect. When the iceberg was sighted at 11:40 p.m., evasive maneuvers were attempted, but the ship's size and speed made collision unavoidable. The impact tore a 300-foot gash along the starboard side of the hull, allowing water to flood multiple forward compartments. Crew members immediately began moving passengers to higher decks and lifeboats. Structural stresses caused bulkheads to bend and decks to warp, increasing the risk of catastrophic failure. Stewards and officers assisted passengers in boarding lifeboats, using ropes and gangways to maintain order. Lifeboats were lowered sequentially, though insufficient numbers meant many passengers remained on deck as the ship's bow sank progressively. Titanic's life-saving equipment included more than just lifeboats. The ship carried life belts, life jackets, and rafts designed to support passengers temporarily if lifeboats were unavailable. Life jackets were made of cork and canvas, and storage racks were placed on multiple decks for rapid access. Crew members were trained to distribute these devices quickly and to assist passengers in donning them correctly. However, many passengers had never used life jackets before and required instruction during the emergency. The ship also featured advanced fire safety systems for the era. Steam-operated pumps and fire hoses were installed throughout the vessel, and crew members conducted drills to respond to onboard fires. Fire doors could be manually or hydraulically closed to prevent the spread of flames. Kitchens were equipped with fire suppression measures, and boiler rooms were monitored continuously to prevent overheating or accidental ignition of coal dust. These precautions, while effective for fire prevention, did not mitigate the flooding from the iceberg impact. Titanic's kitchen staff prepared meals in 3 distinct galleys: first class, second class, and third class. Each kitchen was tailored to the volume and type of food required. First-class meals were elaborate and involved multiple chefs working simultaneously to produce dishes such as roasted meats, soufflés, and fresh seafood. Second-class meals were simpler but balanced, often including soup, meat, potatoes, and vegetables. Third-class meals prioritized sustenance and efficiency, serving stews, bread, and porridge in large quantities. The preparation of food required careful coordination with storage areas and ice rooms to ensure freshness. The ship's deck crew maintained continuous surveillance of the vessel's exterior. Deckhands polished brass fittings, maintained railings, and monitored for signs of damage or wear. They also assisted with the rigging of flags and signal lights, which were used to communicate with nearby ships or harbor authorities. Maintenance included cleaning scuppers, lubricating moving parts, and inspecting lifeboat davits and winches for proper function. Titanic's passengers brought a variety of personal items and cargo on board, from fine jewelry and artwork to tools and household goods. The crew cataloged and stowed baggage carefully to prevent loss or damage. Valuables were often secured in locked cabins or with ship officers, while larger luggage was placed in storage holds. The careful management of personal and commercial cargo contributed to the ship's overall organization and stability. The ship's medical facilities included a fully equipped surgery, a dispensary, and a small pharmacy. Surgeons and nurses were trained to handle a range of emergencies, including injuries, illness, and childbirth. Medical staff conducted routine inspections of crew and passenger health, administered medications, and maintained hygiene standards. During the iceberg disaster, the scale of casualties quickly overwhelmed these facilities, requiring improvisation to treat injuries and exposure to cold water. Titanic also carried a small contingent of postal workers responsible for sorting and handling mail during the voyage. Mail was stored in a dedicated compartment and processed daily to ensure timely delivery upon arrival in New York. This included letters, packages, and commercial correspondence. Postal clerks coordinated with the wireless operators to transmit urgent communications, though the volume of passenger telegrams sometimes slowed official message handling. The ship's promenade decks offered passengers open-air access for exercise, relaxation, and observation of the ocean. First-class promenades were adorned with wooden decking, railings, and seating, while second- and third-class decks were more functional but still provided space for walking or social interaction. Weather conditions dictated when passengers could remain on deck, and crew members monitored safety, assisting with movement along slippery surfaces or when waves washed over the rails. On the night of April 14th, ice warnings from other ships were observed on the bridge log, including visual sightings and wireless messages. Officers debated adjustments to course and speed, balancing safety against the expectation of punctual arrival in New York. The calm sea and clear skies made icebergs difficult to spot visually until very close, limiting reaction time. When the iceberg was sighted at 11:40 p.m., evasive maneuvers were executed, but the massive momentum of the ship made a collision unavoidable. Titanic's bridge featured a variety of navigation and control instruments beyond the standard compass. Officers had access to a mechanical engine order telegraph, which allowed them to communicate precise speed and engine instructions to the engine room. The bridge also included a log to measure the ship's speed through water and sounding devices to monitor water depth in shallower areas, although in the mid-Atlantic these devices were rarely needed. Chronometers and accurate timekeeping were crucial for celestial navigation, ensuring longitude calculations aligned with latitude observations. The ship's public rooms were carefully designed for both function and social presentation. First-class drawing rooms included carved wood paneling, stained glass, and plush seating. Lighting fixtures were strategically placed to enhance elegance while maintaining safety. Reading rooms contained books, newspapers, and periodicals from both Europe and the United States, catering to the interests of well-educated passengers. Second-class lounges, while simpler, were furnished for comfort and recreational use, allowing for card games, conversation, and casual social interaction. Third-class common rooms prioritized space efficiency and communal engagement, enabling passengers to gather for meals, games, or group activities. Titanic's cargo included industrial materials such as iron, timber, and textiles, which were stored in lower holds and secured with wooden beams and tie-downs to prevent shifting. Refrigerated holds preserved perishable goods like dairy, meat, and fish using early ammonia-based refrigeration systems. Crew regularly inspected these areas to ensure cargo integrity and monitor temperature levels, particularly important during the extended transatlantic voyage. Improperly secured cargo could compromise the ship's balance and safety. Water management on board was critical. Titanic carried multiple freshwater tanks and an advanced pumping system that distributed potable water to all passenger classes and crew areas. Steam condensers were used to supplement freshwater supply, converting seawater to freshwater for drinking, cooking, and bathing. Crew members maintained filtration and piping, ensuring that water quality remained safe throughout the voyage. Plumbing systems included gravity-fed drains, pressurized water lines, and waste storage tanks, which required regular monitoring to prevent contamination or leaks. Crew members assigned to engineering and boiler rooms faced extreme working conditions. Stokers and firemen spent long shifts shoveling coal into furnaces, enduring high temperatures, smoke, and constant vibration. Engine room officers oversaw boiler pressure, monitored gauges, and coordinated with the bridge to maintain target speed. Steam leaks, mechanical noise, and heat were constant challenges, and workers developed a rhythm of labor that balanced efficiency with personal endurance. Titanic's wireless room operated nearly around the clock. Jack Phillips and Harold Bride alternated shifts, transmitting passenger telegrams and receiving communications from other ships. Wireless operators used Morse code to relay vital information, including iceberg sightings and weather updates. The volume of personal messages often competed with navigational warnings, highlighting operational limitations and human decision-making in prioritizing communications. The ship's recreational amenities were designed to provide comfort and distraction. First-class facilities included a gymnasium equipped with mechanical exercise machines, a swimming pool, and a squash court. Passengers were encouraged to use these facilities for health and social interaction. Second-class passengers had access to deck space and lounges for physical activity, while third-class passengers utilized open-air decks for walking, games, and informal gatherings, which helped maintain morale during the voyage. Titanic carried numerous small boats for auxiliary purposes in addition to lifeboats. These included emergency tenders and collapsible boats used for maintenance, shore trips, or contingency situations. Crew members were trained to deploy these quickly and efficiently. These smaller vessels became crucial during the disaster, as some collapsible lifeboats were launched late and partially submerged due to flooding, yet still contributed to the survival of additional passengers. On the evening of April 14th, Titanic's officers noted increased concentrations of floating ice. The captain and officers discussed minor course adjustments but ultimately maintained near maximum speed to adhere to schedule. Conditions were deceptively calm, with minimal wind and a smooth sea, reducing the visible cues that might have indicated hazard. When the iceberg was sighted, evasive maneuvers including engine reversal and a hard turn were attempted. The impact occurred along the starboard bow, tearing the hull and compromising 6 compartments, initiating the chain of events that would lead to the ship's breakup. Titanic carried specialized equipment for maintaining the ship's mechanical and operational efficiency. The engine rooms included multiple bilge pumps, designed to remove water that accumulated from minor leaks or condensation. Steam-powered pumps circulated water to maintain boiler efficiency and to cool machinery. Crew members monitored the operation of these pumps continuously, ensuring that water levels in bilge compartments did not compromise engine performance or hull stability. The ship's anchor system was a feat of engineering. Titanic had 2 main anchors, each weighing over 15 tons, deployed using windlasses operated by engine power. Anchors were tested during the voyage and regularly maintained to ensure smooth operation. Chain lockers stored hundreds of meters of heavy chain, which needed careful handling to prevent tangles or mechanical damage. This system was essential for safe docking in ports such as Southampton, Cherbourg, and Queenstown. Titanic's artistic and decorative features were extensive. First-class lounges were adorned with ornate woodwork, decorative plaster ceilings, and hand-painted murals. Sculptures, carved panels, and stained glass windows created an atmosphere of luxury intended to rival the finest hotels of the era. Lighting fixtures were crafted from bronze and glass, combining functionality with aesthetic appeal. Even staircases and elevator lobbies were treated as showcase areas, reflecting the shipbuilders' attention to visual impact. The ship's crew included specialized officers such as quartermasters, who steered the vessel under the direction of the captain and navigating officers. Quartermasters maintained constant vigilance over rudder position, compass heading, and engine telegraph instructions. Helmsmen were trained to respond instantly to orders, adjusting course to avoid hazards or to follow navigational plans. The precision of these operations was critical during the iceberg collision, as the ship's momentum left very little room for correction. Titanic's storage systems included extensive cold rooms for food preservation, particularly for first-class and second-class meals. Ice blocks were stored and replenished from insulated compartments, and provisions were arranged to minimize spoilage. Crew members rotated stock, checked temperatures, and prepared ingredients for daily meal service. Coordination between galleys and storage areas ensured that food was ready on time and maintained the expected quality, even during long crossings. Passengers traveling in third class often carried small keepsakes, clothing, and tools necessary for establishing new lives in the United States. Stewards helped store and safeguard luggage in designated holds. These storage practices also contributed to ship stability by distributing weight evenly across the hull. Crew members maintained detailed logs of luggage locations to facilitate retrieval upon arrival in New York. The ship's deck lighting included electric lamps positioned along railings, stairwells, and promenades, providing illumination for nighttime movement. Deckhands checked these lights daily to replace bulbs, repair wiring, and clean fixtures. Proper illumination was essential for safety, especially during boarding, disembarking, or movement along open decks in adverse conditions. Titanic's musical and social programs included evening concerts, tea dances, and recitals performed in first-class lounges. Musicians were on board full-time, rehearsing multiple hours daily to maintain repertoire. Passengers could request specific pieces or participate in sing-alongs during informal gatherings. These cultural activities contributed to the social atmosphere and were considered an integral part of luxury travel in 1912. The ship carried its own carpenters, painters, and general maintenance crew tasked with repairing minor damage, maintaining finishes, and responding to structural issues. Carpentry workshops were located near cargo holds, stocked with timber, tools, and hardware. Painters regularly inspected public spaces, deck railings, and bulkheads to preserve appearance and prevent corrosion. This team ensured that the ship remained operationally sound and visually appealing throughout the voyage. On the night of April 14th, Titanic's officers relied on the ship's lookouts and bridge observations to detect ice. The calm, moonless night reduced visibility, making iceberg detection extremely difficult. When the iceberg was finally sighted at 11:40 p.m., officers ordered full-speed reduction and hard rudder maneuvering, but the ship's momentum prevented complete avoidance. The collision tore the starboard side hull plates, flooding 6 forward compartments. Bulkheads slowed water ingress initially, but were eventually overwhelmed, triggering the progressive sinking of the bow section. Titanic's gymnasium, located on the starboard side of the ship, was equipped with mechanical exercise machines that used pulley systems and resistance weights, allowing passengers to maintain physical fitness during the long Atlantic crossing. A trained instructor oversaw the space, guiding first-class passengers through routines and exercises. The gym also included specialized equipment such as rowing machines and chest expanders, which were considered advanced fitness technology at the time. The ship featured a heated swimming pool, an unusual amenity for transatlantic liners. Water temperature was maintained using steam pipes connected to the boilers, ensuring a comfortable environment for swimming. The pool area included changing rooms, wooden benches, and decorative tiling. First-class passengers could enjoy swimming as part of recreational routines, while attendants managed safety and hygiene. Titanic's squash court was located on the starboard side near the gymnasium. Wooden floors, padded walls, and ventilation systems allowed passengers to play regardless of external weather conditions. Equipment such as rackets and balls were provided, and staff maintained the court daily. This recreational space reflected the emphasis on leisure and entertainment for first-class passengers, combining physical activity with social engagement. The ship carried an onboard barber and hairdressing salon, available for first-class and some second-class passengers. Services included haircuts, shaves, and grooming. The salon was equipped with running water, mirrors, and electrical lighting, allowing barbers to work efficiently even at night. This amenity was part of the broader effort to provide hotel-like services on board. Titanic had a fully staffed postal room. Postal clerks handled thousands of letters and parcels daily, sorting them for delivery upon arrival in New York. Mail was stored in temperature-controlled compartments to prevent damage. Special arrangements were made for urgent messages, which were transmitted via wireless telegraph. The postal service was considered an essential function, supporting communication between continents during an era when transatlantic correspondence could otherwise take weeks. Titanic's electrical engineering staff maintained not only lighting but also motors, alarms, and communication devices. Electric elevators required constant oversight, as doorkeepers and engineers monitored motor performance, cables, and pulleys. Any malfunction could affect passenger comfort and safety, particularly in first-class areas where elevators connected multiple decks. Maintenance staff performed daily inspections and repaired minor issues immediately. Third-class passengers frequently organized social events on deck, including communal singing, storytelling, and folk games. These informal gatherings provided emotional support during the voyage. Despite minimal private space and lower quality accommodations, third-class travelers created communities within the ship, relying on cooperation and cultural traditions to maintain morale. Titanic's coal bunkers required meticulous management. Coal was shoveled by hand into furnaces, and stokers worked in shifts of several hours, maintaining steam pressure for propulsion. Coal dust accumulation created a fire hazard, and engineers monitored temperatures and ventilation closely. The continuous labor was physically exhausting and essential for sustaining the ship's speed and navigational stability. On-board lighting included emergency lamps and signals. Signal lamps were located on the bridge and upper decks, used for communication with nearby ships or in distress situations. Crew members were trained to operate these lamps quickly and accurately, transmitting Morse code messages to alert others of hazards. Titanic also carried an onboard printing press for passenger newspapers and bulletins. This facility produced daily bulletins including ship schedules, news updates, and entertainment announcements. Crew members ensured timely distribution of these materials to lounges, cabins, and dining areas, maintaining passenger engagement and awareness of shipboard events. The iceberg collision at 11:40 p.m. damaged 6 forward compartments, overwhelming bulkheads designed to contain flooding. Officers immediately began lifeboat deployment and passenger evacuation. Crew members assisted passengers to don life jackets and directed them to designated boarding points. The starboard side was heavily damaged, causing the bow to settle rapidly while the stern gradually rose out of the water. Water pressure caused structural deformation, and decks began to buckle under increasing stress. Titanic's shipboard library, located near the first-class lounge, contained hundreds of books covering literature, history, science, and travel. Passengers could borrow volumes or read in comfortable chairs provided by the library. A dedicated librarian oversaw the collection, organized books by genre and language, and ensured their preservation during the voyage. This amenity reflected the emphasis on cultural enrichment for first-class travelers. The ship also carried a small onboard photographer and darkroom. Passengers could have portraits taken or photograph social events on the promenade decks. Photograph equipment was maintained carefully to prevent damage from humidity and salt air. Film development and printing were completed on board, allowing passengers to receive photographs before disembarkation in New York. Titanic's icebreaker crew trained in handling small-scale ice hazards during preliminary voyages. Though the ship was not an icebreaker, crew members familiarized themselves with ice navigation, including lookout protocols, evasive maneuvers, and damage assessment. Despite these preparations, the massive iceberg encountered on April 14th exceeded the ship's ability to avoid collision given its speed and momentum. The ship's bell system provided communication across decks. Bells signaled meal times, emergency alerts, and shift changes for crew. Each bell had a specific tone corresponding to a particular instruction, allowing rapid coordination among departments. Crew members were drilled in interpreting and responding to bell signals to maintain order and efficiency during normal operations and emergencies. Titanic's smoking rooms were segregated by class and gender. First-class smoking rooms featured upholstered chairs, decorative woodwork, and writing desks. Passengers gathered to smoke cigars, read newspapers, and converse. Second-class smoking rooms were simpler but offered similar social opportunities. These spaces were considered essential for relaxation and socialization during the voyage. The ship's galley staff also included bakers who prepared fresh bread, pastries, and cakes daily. Special ovens allowed multiple batches to be baked simultaneously, ensuring continuous supply for all classes. Bakers monitored ingredient quality, storage conditions, and oven temperatures, coordinating closely with kitchen stewards to schedule deliveries to dining areas. Titanic had a small onboard shoemaker and repair workshop for shoes and leather goods. This service was primarily for first-class passengers, allowing minor repairs to footwear and luggage while at sea. The workshop contained sewing machines, leather, and tools to maintain passenger belongings. Onboard water pressure systems required careful calibration. Pumps delivered water to baths, sinks, and showers at consistent pressure. Crew regularly tested valves, checked for leaks, and ensured that hot water was available throughout the ship. Steam-powered heaters provided consistent temperature regulation, critical for first and second-class passenger comfort. Titanic carried a small contingent of religious staff. A ship chaplain conducted services in first-class lounges and offered spiritual guidance to passengers. Religious observances were scheduled regularly, and chaplains provided counsel or comfort when requested. This presence reflected the social norms and expectations of the time, emphasizing moral guidance and pastoral care. The ship's clocks and timekeeping devices were carefully synchronized with Greenwich Mean Time to ensure accurate navigation. Officers compared chronometers daily, cross-referencing with celestial observations to maintain accurate positional calculations. Accurate timekeeping was essential for maintaining course, estimating arrival times, and coordinating communication with other ships. When the iceberg struck, flooding progressed rapidly and the bow sank lower into the ocean. Crew began organizing lifeboats and guiding passengers upward. Officers prioritized first-class cabins, while third-class passengers faced greater difficulty reaching boat decks due to maze-like corridors and locked gates. Panic increased gradually as water levels rose, but many passengers followed crew instructions, moving toward muster stations or deck areas with lifeboats. Titanic's smoking room featured elaborate ventilation systems to maintain air quality while accommodating numerous passengers. Fans circulated air through ductwork connected to the upper decks, preventing smoke from becoming oppressive. This design allowed social gatherings in the smoking room to remain comfortable, without spreading smoke to adjacent lounges or cabins. The ship's squash court floor was constructed with carefully chosen wood to provide proper bounce and durability. Walls were padded for safety, and ventilation ensured air circulation during games. Staff maintained equipment and cleaned the floor daily, allowing passengers to enjoy recreation even during inclement weather. Titanic included a small darkroom for photographic development, allowing onboard photographers to process images taken during the voyage. Chemicals were carefully stored and temperature and humidity controlled, ensuring high-quality prints. Passengers could receive their photographs before arriving in New York, a rare convenience at the time. The ship carried special weather observation instruments. Barometers, thermometers, and anemometers provided information for navigational planning. Officers recorded weather data in the ship's logbook, contributing to forecasts and sharing observations with other vessels via wireless telegraphy. Accurate weather data allowed officers to anticipate ice hazards, though limitations in detection technology contributed to the collision. Titanic's onboard postal staff processed mail in real time, ensuring urgent correspondence reached wireless operators for transmission. Clerks logged each item, sorted letters, and packaged parcels for immediate delivery upon arrival. This system allowed passengers and businesses to maintain transatlantic communication with minimal delay. The ship's carpenter crew maintained tools, repaired woodwork, and ensured that doors, staircases, and paneling remained functional and safe. During the voyage, carpenters inspected bulkheads, deck boards, and railings, addressing wear or damage from normal operation. Their work helped preserve structural integrity and passenger safety. Titanic's kitchens employed ice cutting and ice storage techniques to preserve perishable foods. Large blocks of ice were delivered in insulated holds, and staff monitored temperature regularly. Ice was also used in drinks and for cooling specific food items, reflecting the high standard of culinary service expected by passengers. On April 14, 1912, Lookout Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee observed the iceberg just ahead. Officers immediately ordered hard a starboard and full astern, but the ship's size and momentum limited the effectiveness of the maneuvers. The iceberg tore along the starboard hull, flooding multiple compartments. Crew members began sounding the alarm, and distress rockets were readied for signaling nearby ships. Titanic's wireless operators transmitted CQD and SOS distress signals, detailing coordinates, number of passengers, and severity of the emergency. Nearby ships, including Carpathia and Mount Temple, received messages and plotted courses for rescue. Operators continued transmitting messages for hours, even as the vessel began to break apart. Deck crew assisted passengers by guiding them to lifeboats, helping with ropes, and organizing orderly boarding. Officers attempted to maintain calm, issuing instructions repeatedly. Many passengers, unaware of the full danger, hesitated or returned to cabins, creating bottlenecks on stairwells and passageways. Third-class passengers faced additional challenges navigating locked gates and unfamiliar corridors. As the bow descended, water pressure caused bulkheads to bend, and structural failure propagated along the ship. Decks twisted under strain, and lights flickered before extinguishing entirely in some areas. Collapse of interior supports accelerated flooding. while stern sections lifted into the air before gradually succumbing to water. Passengers and crew clung to rails, lifeboats, or debris, enduring freezing temperatures and violent motion. Titanic's crew maintained constant vigilance over the ship's ventilation systems, particularly in enclosed areas such as dining rooms, lounges, and lower decks. Fans, vents, and ducts were inspected daily to prevent stagnation and ensure a supply of fresh air. This attention to airflow was especially important in third-class sections, where many passengers were grouped together and temperatures could rise quickly. The ship carried an onboard laundry service. Linen, uniforms, and passenger clothing were cleaned daily by a team of stewards and launderers. Steam-powered washing machines and large copper tubs were used for washing, while mechanical wringers and drying rooms facilitated rapid processing. Cleanliness was a priority for first and second-class passengers, though third-class facilities were simpler but still effective for maintaining hygiene during the long voyage. Titanic's navigational charts were meticulously updated during the journey. Officers cross-referenced previous routes, recent ice reports, and weather observations to plot the safest course across the North Atlantic. Charts included depth measurements, shipping lanes, and known hazards. Officers also used compasses and celestial observations to correct for drift, ensuring the ship maintained its intended heading. The ship carried numerous signaling devices, including semaphore flags, signal lamps, and whistles, in addition to wireless telegraphy. Flags were used for ship-to-ship communication during daylight, while lamps allowed Morse code signaling at night. Whistles provided audible alerts for docking or emergency situations. Crew members were trained in all signaling methods to maintain communication under varying conditions. Titanic's crew included specialized carpenters, plumbers, and electricians who addressed technical issues immediately. Carpenters repaired structural elements, while plumbers ensured water supply and waste systems functioned. Electricians maintained lighting circuits, elevators, and telegraph equipment. This multidisciplinary team ensured that operational and safety standards were consistently met throughout the voyage. The ship also carried a small collection of scientific instruments for monitoring oceanic conditions. Thermometers, barometers, and hydrometers provided data on air and water temperatures, barometric pressure, and ocean salinity. Officers and crew recorded these readings in logs, contributing to the understanding of North Atlantic conditions and providing early weather data to shore stations. On April 14th, Titanic's ice warnings from other ships were carefully noted in the bridge log, including sightings from the Californian and Coronia. Officers discussed whether to reduce speed or alter course. Visibility was hindered by calm seas and lack of moonlight, which prevented early detection of icebergs. Lookouts remained vigilant, though human limitations made spotting hazards difficult until dangerously close. After the iceberg struck, structural stress caused bulkheads to deform, allowing water to spill into adjacent compartments. Crew immediately initiated emergency protocols, signaling passengers and preparing lifeboats. Officers attempted to prioritize women and children, but the process was hampered by narrow stairwells, locked gates, and passenger confusion. Despite their efforts, insufficient lifeboats meant many were left on the sinking decks. Titanic's distress signals, transmitted via wireless, reached nearby vessels including Carpathia and Mount Temple. Operators continued sending coordinates, passenger counts, and emergency requests even as the ship's power and communications were compromised. Carpathia immediately altered course, navigating through ice fields to reach survivors. Crew members on board Carpathia prepared blankets, food, and medical aid for those rescued from lifeboats and debris. Deck crew assisted passengers by guiding them to lifeboats, helping with ropes, and lowering the boats into the water. Officers and senior crew coordinated the sequence of loading, while musicians and staff attempted to maintain calm through reassurance. Third-class passengers faced additional obstacles due to language barriers and locked doors separating them from upper decks, which contributed to a higher mortality rate among lower-class travelers. As the bow sank further, the stern rose dramatically, creating a steep incline on the deck. Passengers clung to rails, staircases, and debris, while water flooded lower levels. The ship's structural integrity deteriorated rapidly, leading to the final breakup. Lifeboats launched late were partially swamped, but many still contributed to survival. Individuals improvised using floating debris, canvas, and makeshift rafts to remain afloat in freezing water. Titanic's deck maintenance crew played a crucial role in keeping the ship operational and safe. They regularly inspected mooring ropes, life-saving equipment, and railings. Wooden deck planks were treated with oil to prevent water damage and reduce slipperiness, while metal fittings were polished and checked for corrosion. Crew members also ensured that gangways, ladders, and staircases were secure and functional for both daily activity and emergency use. The ship carried a fully equipped carpentry workshop near the lower decks. Carpenters maintained wooden furnishings, repaired hull fittings, and crafted temporary supports when needed. During the voyage, this team performed minor modifications and repairs, including fixing cabin doors, reinforcing deck benches, and addressing damage from normal wear. Their presence allowed rapid response to structural issues without disrupting passenger services. Titanic's crew included trained photographers and assistants who documented shipboard life, social events, and the journey itself. A darkroom allowed immediate development of photographs for passenger purchase. The photographers also captured images of safety equipment, lifeboat drills, and navigation procedures, serving both practical and promotional purposes. The ship's galleys included specialized pastry chefs who prepared desserts, breads, and confections for first-class passengers. Ingredients were carefully stored to maintain freshness, and ovens were monitored for consistent temperature. Pastry staff coordinated with kitchen stewards to ensure timely service during formal meals and afternoon teas. Titanic carried a small onboard shoemaker and leather workshop for repairing passenger shoes, luggage, and other leather goods. Craftsmen maintained sewing machines, tools, and materials, providing convenience for passengers and contributing to overall satisfaction during the voyage. Deckhand crews also maintained signal flags and emergency lighting systems. Flags were checked for tiers, correct identification codes, and proper stowage. Signal lamps were polished and lenses cleaned to ensure maximum visibility. Crew trained in signaling procedures could convey messages to nearby ships or respond to emergencies efficiently. Titanic's water supply system was complex, including multiple freshwater tanks, condensers, and distribution pumps. Engineers monitored tank levels, pressure, and water purity. Steam from boilers was used to heat water and assist in distribution. Crew ensured that water reached all cabins, galleys, and public areas without interruption, which was critical for hygiene and passenger comfort. The ship also carried a small collection of meteorological instruments to track atmospheric conditions. Thermometers, barometers, and anemometers provided readings that officers recorded regularly. This information allowed adjustments to course and speed, and reports were sometimes relayed to shore or other vessels to contribute to broader weather forecasting. On the night of April 14th, officers and crew observed patches of floating ice using visual lookouts and binoculars. Despite prior ice warnings from other ships, the sheer size and low visibility of the iceberg reduced reaction time. The collision occurred at 11:40 p.m., tearing open the starboard forward hull. Water began flooding 6 compartments, overwhelming bulkheads and initiating progressive sinking. Crew immediately moved to assist passengers, issuing instructions, helping with life jackets, and directing them to lifeboats. Officers attempted to prioritize women and children while musicians and stewards provided calm and reassurance. Third-class passengers encountered additional difficulties due to locked gates and complex passageways, resulting in slower access to lifeboats. Wireless operators continued sending distress signals, CQD and SOS, despite power limitations. Carpathia and other nearby ships received these messages and altered course to assist. Operators transmitted vital information on location, passenger numbers, and the urgency of the emergency. Communication continued until the ship's electrical systems failed due to flooding. As the bow sank, the stern rose steeply, causing decks to incline dramatically. Structural stress led to twisting and cracking of steel decks, while water rushed into previously dry sections. Passengers and crew clung to railings, lifeboats, or floating debris. Some used personal belongings and furniture to stay afloat. The freezing Atlantic temperatures compounded the danger, leading to rapid onset of hypothermia for those in the water. Titanic's bow compartments, once flooded, created immense pressure on the forward decks. Crew reported a series of loud creaks and groans as metal twisted and bulkheads strained. Passengers on upper decks noticed unusual vibrations and slight tilting, which many initially mistook for typical ocean movement. As water poured into the lower compartments, stairwells and passageways began to flood slowly, cutting off access to some cabins. The ship's grand staircase, an iconic feature, became a perilous zone as water levels rose beneath it. Carpets soaked quickly and marble steps grew slippery. Crew directed passengers to use handrails and guided them toward lifeboat stations. Some passengers carried children or personal belongings while attempting to navigate these increasingly dangerous areas. Titanic's wireless room became a hub of frantic activity. Operators manually switched to backup power to continue transmitting distress signals. They also relayed reports from crew members about which decks were flooding fastest and which lifeboats had already departed. Wireless logs later revealed the incredible speed and coordination required to manage communications amid growing chaos. Food and provisions for survivors were organized by stewards and crew. Lifeboats were stocked with biscuits, drinking water, and basic first aid. Crew members distributed these items while passengers waited in freezing air temperatures. Improvised methods were employed to keep supplies dry and accessible during evacuation. Titanic's lifeboat launch mechanisms were manually operated davits, which required precise coordination. Crew had to lower boats carefully while keeping them balanced and preventing them from swinging into the hull. Some collapsible boats required additional effort to unfold and stabilize, while fully rigid lifeboats descended more smoothly but still demanded careful handling. Passengers on the boat deck witnessed acts of extraordinary courage and tragedy. Men helped women and children into lifeboats, sometimes giving up their own chance at safety. Musicians continued to play on deck to maintain morale, despite the freezing temperatures and danger. Some passengers shared personal items, clothing, or blankets with others, demonstrating solidarity in the face of disaster. The ship's stern gradually lifted out of the water as the bow sank. Observers noted that the propellers rotated above the surface before disappearing into the dark Atlantic. As decks tilted steeply, unsecured objects slid forward, creating hazards for those still on board. The ship's funnels collapsed sequentially due to structural stress, and the final breaking of the hull caused an immense rush of water into remaining compartments. Survivors in the water clung to debris, lifeboats, or floating furniture. Hypothermia set in rapidly. Even strong swimmers could survive only a short time. Crew and passengers improvised flotation devices using cushions, pieces of deck planking, and canvas. Some survivors were rescued directly from the water by lifeboats, while others had to endure long periods before Carpathia arrived. Titanic's sinking highlighted critical shortcomings in maritime safety protocols. Investigators later noted the insufficient number of lifeboats, locked gates restricting third-class access, and lack of adequate emergency drills. These findings led to immediate reforms in international maritime law, including lifeboat requirements, wireless operation standards, and ice patrol coordination in the North Atlantic. Titanic's radio operators, Harold Bride and Jack Phillips, improvised methods to maximize signal range as the ship's power systems failed. Using batteries and emergency circuits, they continued to broadcast distress calls, alternating between SOS and CQD signals. This improvisation allowed Carpathia and other vessels to pinpoint the sinking despite worsening weather and limited visibility. Some first-class passengers assisted crew in lifeboat operations. They helped maintain order, guided women and children into boats, and ensured ropes and davits were secure. These acts of cooperation exemplified how social class divisions could temporarily dissolve in life-threatening situations. The ship's grand dining room, once a site of opulent meals, became partially submerged as water flooded lower decks. Chandeliers tilted dangerously, and tables and chairs floated or slid across the floor. Crew assisted stranded passengers, navigating through submerged corridors to guide them to upper decks. Titanic's engine room crew, many of whom remained at their posts until the final moments, worked to maintain power for lighting and pumps. Engineers and firemen stayed in extreme conditions, ensuring that as many lifeboats as possible could be launched before electrical systems failed. Their efforts delayed complete darkness and contributed to the survival of additional passengers. Some third-class passengers organized impromptu groups to navigate from lower decks to boat deck. Knowledgeable crew members led them through corridors and staircases, bypassing locked gates where possible. Language differences and unfamiliarity with the ship complicated the evacuation, but cooperation and guidance enabled many to reach lifeboats safely. Titanic carried a set of collapsible lifeboats designed to fit in storage compartments on deck. Some of these boats were difficult to launch due to water flooding their storage areas. Crew worked together to push, unfold, and stabilize these lifeboats, which ultimately saved dozens of additional passengers who would have otherwise been left behind. Passengers in the freezing Atlantic were exposed to near-freezing water temperatures. Hypothermia became an immediate threat, causing disorientation, numbness, and eventual loss of consciousness for many. Survivors used life jackets, rafts, and floating debris to remain partially above water. Those in lifeboats extended blankets, coats, and personal belongings to aid those in the water. Titanic's officers documented the sequence of flooding and lifeboat launches meticulously, even in the midst of chaos. Logs and survivor testimonies later provided critical information for inquiries. The documentation included times of impact, progression of water ingress, and individual lifeboat departures. This record was invaluable for subsequent investigations into safety failures. The ship's music ensemble, famously continuing to play as evacuation unfolded, eventually had to abandon instruments due to rising water and tilting decks. Their courage and composure offered comfort to passengers facing imminent disaster, becoming a defining story of heroism and morale during the sinking. Titanic's final moments saw the stern lift nearly vertically before breaking apart. Massive structural failure caused the ship to split, sending debris and trapped air pockets into the surrounding water. Observers in lifeboats reported explosions or implosions, likely from sudden pressurization of watertight compartments collapsing under water pressure. After the sinking, survivors in lifeboats endured hours in the cold night awaiting rescue. Crew managed limited rations, provided reassurance, and maintained group cohesion to prevent panic. Passengers shared clothing, blankets, and water to maximize survival chances. The arrival of Carpathia hours later marked the first organized rescue operation, with crew from the ship preparing decks to accommodate survivors, administer medical aid, and provide blankets and food. As the first rays of dawn broke over the North Atlantic on April 15, 1912, Carpathia approached the area where Titanic had sunk. Crew members on Carpathia prepared lifeboats to pull survivors from the icy water, arranging ropes, blankets, and stretchers on deck. Passengers who had survived in lifeboats were carefully lifted aboard using ropes and ladders, a delicate operation requiring both strength and precision to prevent accidents in the crowded, freezing conditions. Medical personnel aboard Carpathia immediately triaged survivors. Hypothermia was rampant. Many passengers were shivering violently, with slowed breathing and loss of motor control. Doctors and nurses wrapped survivors in blankets, administered warm fluids, and treated shock. Those with injuries from falls, crushes, or exposure received bandages, antiseptic care, and in severe cases, intravenous fluids. Crew improvised makeshift shelters on deck to provide warmth and privacy. Personal belongings from Titanic were recovered alongside survivors. Passengers brought clothing, suitcases, and personal items in lifeboats, while floating debris such as crates, furniture, and cargo were collected by Carpathia's crew. These items were cataloged and returned to owners when possible, though much was lost to the ocean. Carpathia's crew recorded detailed reports of survivor numbers, lifeboat conditions, and time of recovery. These reports later served as primary evidence for the international investigations into the sinking. Officers cross-referenced accounts from multiple lifeboats to reconstruct the sequence of events accurately. Many Titanic survivors recounted acts of bravery that had gone unnoticed in the initial chaos. Some passengers guided the disoriented, assisted elderly or infirm individuals, and maintained calm in the lifeboats. Crew members risked their own lives to prevent capsizing, redistribute weight, and stabilize overloaded boats. These stories became emblematic of human courage and resilience in maritime disaster narratives. Following the rescue, Carpathia's captain communicated with shipping authorities in New York and London, providing initial reports of the tragedy. These communications facilitated rapid mobilization of investigative teams, press coverage, and coordination with other vessels in the North Atlantic. The recovery of Titanic's victims in the following weeks was organized by ships such as Mackay Bennett. Specialized crews worked in freezing conditions to retrieve bodies from lifeboats and the water. Each recovered individual was cataloged, identified when possible, and prepared for burial at sea or transport to families. This operation emphasized the human toll of the disaster and provided closure for relatives who had lost loved ones. Investigations conducted in both the United States and the United Kingdom revealed multiple failings in Titanic's design and operation. The insufficient number of lifeboats, lack of proper emergency drills, and communication lapses were cited as critical factors. These inquiries led to significant reforms in maritime safety, including mandatory lifeboat drills, 24-hour wireless operation on passenger vessels, and stricter hull design standards. Titanic's cultural legacy began almost immediately. Books, newspaper articles, and lectures recounted the disaster, focusing on heroism, tragedy, and lessons learned. Memorials were established in multiple countries, and survivors shared first-hand accounts, emphasizing the human experiences of fear, courage, and loss. The disaster also influenced shipbuilding and navigation practices. Ice patrols were established in the North Atlantic. Ships were equipped with better radio equipment, and regulations required sufficient lifeboats for all passengers. Titanic's sinking became a pivotal moment in maritime history, reshaping public expectations for safety, accountability, and technological standards. Many survivors recounted the harrowing experience of staying in lifeboats overnight. Rowing, bailing water, and keeping passengers calm were constant tasks. Crew members rotated duties, ensuring that oars were continuously manned and that everyone had a chance to rest briefly. Passengers shared clothing, blankets, and even food rations to maximize survival chances. On board Carpathia, doctors encountered unusual medical challenges. Beyond hypothermia, some survivors suffered from cardiac stress caused by cold shock, while others displayed severe dehydration and exhaustion from prolonged exposure. Crew improvised warming techniques, including steam blankets, heated cabins, and hot water bottles. Nurses documented the effectiveness of these interventions, which informed future maritime medical protocols. The psychological impact on survivors became apparent immediately. Many experienced acute shock, disorientation, and emotional trauma. Crew and passengers reported persistent anxiety, nightmares, and survivors' guilt. Counselors and clergy aboard Carpathia provided comfort, listening to accounts and helping individuals process the sudden loss of friends, family, and fellow passengers. Titanic's cargo manifest revealed a wide array of goods, including fine china, wines, fabrics, and automobiles, much of which was lost. Recovery of valuable items was limited to floating debris that could be safely retrieved. Some personal belongings, such as jewelry, letters, and keepsakes, became treasured artifacts for families and later, museums documenting the disaster. The ship's design flaws became a primary focus of international scrutiny. Investigators highlighted the insufficient height of watertight bulkheads, which allowed flooding to progress from one compartment to the next. Steel used in the hull displayed brittleness at freezing temperatures, contributing to catastrophic plate failure during collision. Lessons learned from these flaws informed construction standards for future transatlantic liners. Survivors noted the behavior of individual crew members, including acts of resourcefulness and bravery. Some engineers manually released steam to prevent explosions, while others organized improvised rope networks to assist passengers in climbing to safety. Stewards guided confused or disabled passengers through darkened corridors, using their knowledge of the ship's layout to avoid flooded areas. Titanic's wireless operators, despite abandoning the ship in the final moments, ensured that critical messages reached other vessels. Their persistence not only saved lives but also established protocols for continuous wireless monitoring. This contributed to the creation of international standards requiring ships to maintain 24-hour wireless service, and emergency communication procedures. The cold Atlantic waters posed additional challenges for lifeboat navigation. Rowers had to compensate for wind, currents, and floating ice while keeping the boat stable. Passengers assisted by shifting weight strategically, holding onto oars, and managing supplies. Small improvised sails were occasionally used to catch wind and ease rowing efforts. Carpathia's crew carefully logged each survivor, noting injuries, hypothermia severity, and missing persons. These records were later instrumental in family reunifications, insurance claims, and legal proceedings. Crew members worked tirelessly, often foregoing sleep, to maintain order and provide for the emotional and physical needs of hundreds of traumatized passengers. Titanic's sinking also inspired innovations in lifeboat design. Collapsible boats, davit systems, and storage mechanisms were re-evaluated. Engineers developed more efficient deployment procedures, improved flotation devices, and created life preservers that offered better insulation against cold water. The disaster accelerated technological advancements that shaped maritime safety standards for decades. Some survivors recounted creative improvisations during the disaster. Passengers used luggage, wooden crates, and cushions to create makeshift flotation aids for themselves or others. Blankets were tied together to extend reach or provide insulation, and clothing was layered to conserve body heat. These spontaneous solutions saved lives in situations where lifeboats were insufficient. Titanic carried a small onboard library for first-class passengers, which was also repurposed in the sinking as a temporary refuge. Some passengers gathered in the library, using its higher elevation and solid furniture as platforms to stay above rising water. Crew guided groups from flooded areas into this space, illustrating how knowledge of the ship's layout could aid survival. Crew members working in the forward boiler rooms performed remarkable feats to maintain steam pressure until the final moments. They manually fed coal into furnaces while water levels rose around them. Their labor allowed pumps to operate longer, giving additional time for evacuation and lifeboat preparation. Many of these men perished due to proximity to the flooding compartments. Titanic's collapsible lifeboats required careful handling under freezing conditions. Crew struggled to unfold canvas sides that had stiffened in the cold while ensuring that passengers could board safely. Some boats were launched partially filled due to these difficulties, but the crew's efforts maximized survival under extreme circumstances. Passengers reported acts of selflessness in the chaos. Strangers assisted elderly or infirm travelers, and men helped children navigate steep and slippery decks. Some shared food, water, or clothing, demonstrating human solidarity despite social and class divisions. These actions have been memorialized as examples of courage and altruism in maritime history. Floating debris from Titanic became lifelines for those who could not reach lifeboats. Large wooden panels, cabin doors, and furniture fragments supported multiple individuals simultaneously. Survivors coordinated to remain balanced on these objects, alternating positions to prevent capsizing. Crew and passengers alike improvised to utilize anything buoyant that remained in the water. Medical challenges aboard lifeboats were severe. Crew tended to frostbite, hypothermia, and exhaustion. Limited supplies forced prioritization, with blankets, warm liquids, and basic first aid administered as efficiently as possible. Some passengers suffered from shock and delirium, necessitating careful monitoring and reassurance. Carpathia's crew established a triage system for rescued survivors. Those in the worst condition were placed in heated areas first, while moderately affected individuals received clothing, blankets, and hot drinks. Doctors monitored heart rate, respiration, and body temperature, documenting responses to treatment. These procedures informed future emergency medical protocols for maritime disasters. Titanic's cargo and passenger belongings offered insight into the lives of those aboard. Recovering luggage revealed personal items, correspondence, and luxury goods, while ship logs recorded quantities of food, coal, and equipment lost to the disaster. This documentation helped historians understand the scale of the loss and the variety of social classes represented among passengers. The psychological impact on survivors persisted after rescue. Many experienced survivors' guilt, vivid nightmares, and post-traumatic stress. Letters, memoirs, and interviews from survivors highlighted long-term emotional consequences. shaping early understanding of trauma related to maritime disasters. Finally, Titanic's sinking led to significant international reforms. The International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, SOLA, was established in 1914, mandating lifeboat capacity for all passengers, continuous wireless operation, and regular safety drills. Ice patrols in the North Atlantic were created to monitor hazards, and ship designs incorporated stronger bulkheads and better compartmentalization. Titanic's legacy became both a cautionary tale and a catalyst for lasting change in maritime safety. Titanic's watertight doors, designed to contain flooding in specific compartments, were manually operated by crew from the bridge. These doors could be closed electrically, but many were activated by hand in the early stages of the collision. Despite these precautions, the force of the iceberg caused water to spill over the top edges, bypassing the intended safety measures. The ship's cargo hold contained over 1,500 tons of coal, machinery, and other goods, which shifted as flooding progressed. This movement affected the vessel's balance, contributing to the rapid lift of the bow and the eventual elevation of the stern. Engineers on board monitored ballast tanks and coal movement in an attempt to stabilize the ship, but rising water negated their efforts. Titanic carried a small onboard orchestra that included string and wind instruments. Members played in the first-class lounge, providing entertainment during meals and social events. During the sinking, these musicians famously continued playing as passengers evacuated, offering comfort and maintaining composure amid growing chaos. Their commitment became a lasting symbol of courage. Crew members in charge of life-saving equipment had to quickly identify which lifeboats were ready and which required deployment. Some boats were lowered partially filled due to panic and limited space, while others were held back until crew could arrange seating. Improvised strategies included pairing stronger individuals with weaker passengers to maintain balance and stability in the lifeboats. Titanic's smokestacks, 4 in total, served both functional and aesthetic purposes. 3 actively expelled smoke from the boilers, while the 4th was largely decorative but also served as a ventilation conduit. As the ship sank, the collapsing funnels created falling debris hazards, particularly on the boat deck, where passengers and crew had to dodge twisting metal structures. Several survivors described the experience of climbing up the ship's rigging and masts to higher platforms as water filled lower decks. These risky ascents allowed some passengers to escape rapidly rising water, though many others fell or were swept away by sudden shifts in the vessel's angle. Crew assisted where possible, tying ropes and guiding passengers to safer areas. Titanic's wireless operators not only sent distress messages, but also recorded incoming signals from nearby vessels reporting ice conditions. These records became essential for post-disaster investigations, illustrating both the awareness of hazards and the communication limitations of the time. They also highlighted the heroism of operators who remained at their posts despite imminent danger. Some lifeboats faced mechanical failures during lowering, causing delays in deployment. Crew improvised by using ropes, pulleys, and manual force to stabilize boats and prevent tipping. Passengers were instructed on proper boarding positions and balance, with crew members guiding weight distribution to avoid capsizing. The freezing North Atlantic temperatures presented immediate survival challenges. Water temperatures near 28 degrees Fahrenheit, -2 degrees Celsius, induced cold shock and rapid hypothermia. Passengers who fell into the water without flotation aids had only minutes before incapacitation. Those on lifeboats used blankets, clothing, and shared body warmth to survive until Carpathia arrived. The ship's structural failure sequence revealed significant engineering lessons. Investigators noted that rivet placement and hull steel brittleness at low temperatures contributed to catastrophic hull plate separation. These findings influenced future shipbuilding practices, including material selection, riveting techniques, and compartment design. Titanic's propellers, each 23 feet in diameter, were powered by massive engines located deep within the hull. The 3 propeller shafts transmitted power from both reciprocating steam engines and a central turbine, creating the ship's impressive speed. As water flooded engine rooms, engineers worked to prevent catastrophic boiler explosions by manually regulating steam pressure. an effort that extended the ship's floating time and allowed more passengers to reach lifeboats. The ship's gymnasium, located on the lower deck, included mechanical exercise machines operated by hand cranks. During the voyage, first-class passengers exercised there while enjoying views through portholes. In the disaster, the gymnasium became partially submerged, and crew sometimes directed passengers through this area as an alternative escape route to higher decks. Titanic's postal clerk, John Richard, continued organizing letters and parcels even after the collision. He preserved mail bags and ensured that letters were kept dry in watertight containers. Some mail later washed ashore, providing historical insight into the passengers' communications and daily life aboard the ship. Deck lighting systems relied on both electricity and backup oil lamps. As flooding progressed, electricians manually switched circuits and relocated lamps to maintain visibility on critical passageways. These measures allowed crew to guide passengers toward lifeboats despite rapidly failing electrical infrastructure. The ship's water supply for drinking and washing relied on steam condensers, which turned seawater into potable water. During the disaster, crew attempted to maintain operation of these systems as long as possible, but eventually flooding rendered them inoperative. Passengers and crew improvised by sharing bottled water and melted ice to prevent dehydration. Titanic carried a collection of luxury goods intended for first-class passengers, including fine wines, art pieces, and furniture. Some items floated away as debris, and a few were recovered later by salvage crews. These artifacts provide insight into the wealth and lifestyles represented among the ship's most affluent passengers. Crew members responsible for the ship's davits and lifeboats coordinated complex lowering sequences. In some cases, ropes frayed or davits jammed, requiring on-the-spot repairs. Crew used crowbars, pulleys, and coordinated teamwork to ensure boats were deployed safely, preventing further loss of life. Passengers described the eerie silence in parts of the ship as flooding cut off electrical power. Certain decks became dark and filled with rising water, creating hazardous navigation conditions. Crew used lanterns, shouting, and hand signals to maintain order and guide passengers to evacuation points. The Titanic's anchor chains, massive and anchored at the bow, shifted as water rushed into forward compartments. Crew observed that the movement of these heavy chains contributed to structural stresses in the bow, accelerating the rate at which it submerged. Some survivors recounted the terrifying experience of being trapped in partially flooded cabins. They escaped through portholes, small windows, or connected passageways, often improvising flotation aids using furniture or luggage. These escape stories highlighted the ingenuity and determination of passengers in extreme conditions. Titanic carried a dedicated team of stewards who were responsible for maintaining order in passenger areas, serving meals, and assisting with luggage. During the sinking, these stewards guided passengers through smoke-filled or waterlogged corridors, helped carry children, and physically supported elderly passengers as they climbed ladders or descended to lifeboats. Their knowledge of the ship's layout proved critical in navigating the chaotic, rapidly flooding spaces. The ship's smoking room, once a place of leisure for first-class male passengers, became partially submerged as water reached the lower decks. Some passengers used heavy furniture as flotation or climbing aids. Crew members quickly redirected individuals towards stairwells that remained above water, preventing crowding and further danger. Titanic's cargo included a limited number of motor vehicles, which were stored in the hold. These vehicles, along with crates of machinery and crates of food, shifted as flooding progressed, sometimes striking bulkheads and creating additional hazards. Crew members attempted to secure cargo where possible, but the speed of water ingress rendered many efforts futile. The ship's engine telegraphs, which communicated speed and direction between the bridge and engine rooms, were rendered partially inoperative as flooding progressed. Engineers relied on visual signals, manual valves, and hand-operated controls to maintain steam flow and engine operation for as long as possible, ensuring that lifeboat launches could continue safely. Titanic's carpenter crew maintained a stockpile of tools and materials specifically for emergency repairs. During the collision, they attempted to reinforce bulkheads and patch smaller breaches using wood and metal fittings. Though unable to stop the flooding entirely, their efforts slowed water ingress in specific compartments temporarily. Crew on the bridge attempted to communicate with nearby ships via signal lamps in addition to wireless telegraphy. This redundant communication method proved vital when some wireless circuits failed. Officers transmitted coordinates, ship status, and urgency of rescue to nearby vessels, which ultimately aided in Carpathia's timely arrival. During the final moments of the ship, passengers on the stern reported violent tilting, falling debris, and structural fractures that split sections of the deck apart. Individuals clung to railings or floating objects, improvising safety measures to remain above water. Some survivors recalled being thrown into the water by sudden collapses, while others managed to jump to lifeboats or debris with assistance. Titanic's Lifeboat 6, like others, faced the challenge of launching into icy waters. Passengers and crew carefully coordinated lowering the boat to avoid tipping. People held ropes, adjusted weight distribution, and bailed water continuously. Once afloat, occupants rowed and balanced to maintain stability while awaiting rescue. Floating debris included not only furniture and cargo, but also ship fittings such as doors, lifebuoy rings, and cabin panels. Survivors used these objects to create rafts, supports, or flotation devices. Collaboration among passengers to share and stabilize these improvised platforms increased survival rates. Titanic's disaster spurred immediate international interest in ship design and safety. Naval architects analyzed blueprints and damage reports to understand how bulkhead height, hull materials, and compartmentalization contributed to rapid sinking. These insights influenced the construction of subsequent ocean liners, emphasizing enhanced structural integrity, improved evacuation procedures, and better safety equipment. Titanic carried a network of pneumatic tubes that transported messages between the bridge, officers' quarters, and various departments on the ship. During the sinking, crew attempted to use these tubes to relay information quickly about flooding and lifeboat readiness. Although some tubes became submerged or blocked, this system allowed messages to reach critical areas faster than running physically through the crowded decks. The ship's fan room, responsible for circulating fresh air throughout passenger cabins, became flooded in lower decks. Crew working in these areas helped passengers evacuate trapped zones, sometimes cutting through metal vents or opening hatches to create new escape routes. Their knowledge of ventilation systems proved essential in preventing passengers from becoming trapped by rising water. Titanic's darkroom, used by onboard photographers to develop passenger photographs, served an unexpected purpose during the disaster. Passengers who found temporary refuge in the vicinity used heavy tables and cabinetry to keep above rising water. Crew redirected groups away from the darkroom as flooding progressed, but noted its use as a temporary safe zone in early minutes of the sinking. The ship's carpenter team maintained spare planks, nails, and metal fasteners for emergency reinforcement. During the collision, they improvised barriers and supports to slow water movement between partially flooded compartments. While unable to stop flooding entirely, these interventions bought additional time for lifeboat launches and passenger evacuation. Titanic carried specialized crew for engine maintenance, including boilermen who worked in the furnace rooms. As water rose, these men remained at their posts, manually shoveling coal into furnaces to maintain steam pressure for pumps and engines. Their sacrifice extended operational capabilities, ensuring lighting and pumping systems functioned for as long as possible. Onboard library staff assisted passengers in evacuating, particularly in lower decks, guiding them towards stairwells and exits. They helped families navigate corridors, carried children, and provided calm guidance, demonstrating that non-crew personnel played vital roles in survival. Titanic's cargo included over 200 vehicles, crates of food, and machinery. As flooding progressed, these items shifted unpredictably, creating hazards for passengers and crew. Some individuals used crates and crates' contents as flotation aids or climbing supports, showing ingenuity in life-threatening circumstances. The ship's smokestacks, integral to funneling smoke from boilers, contributed indirectly to survival. As the stern lifted, collapsing funnels displaced air and water in adjacent decks, which pushed some debris upward, giving floating platforms and makeshift rafts temporary stability that survivors clung to. Titanic's orchestra members continued playing on deck even as water levels rose dangerously. They coordinated their positions to avoid being swept overboard, ensuring continuous morale-boosting music until physical survival forced them to abandon instruments. Their dedication became one of the most celebrated symbols of courage in maritime disaster history. Survivors noted the creative use of personal belongings in the water. Passengers lashed together cushions, blankets, and furniture to create floating rafts capable of supporting multiple individuals. These makeshift solutions often determined life or death in the freezing Atlantic temperatures, where hypothermia set in within minutes. Titanic carried specialized postal clerks who maintained the onboard mailroom, sorting thousands of letters for delivery upon arrival. During the collision, these clerks worked to protect valuable correspondence, storing mail bags in watertight containers to prevent loss. Some of these containers later floated free and were recovered by ships in the Atlantic, preserving personal and commercial correspondence that provides insight into the era. The ship's onboard telephone system, connecting officers and key departments, became partially inoperative as power systems failed. Crew adapted by using runners and hand signals to transmit orders and updates. This improvisation was crucial for coordinating lifeboat launches, relaying flooding reports, and maintaining as much order as possible during the disaster. Titanic had a small onboard barber shop and hairdressing salon for first-class passengers. As the disaster unfolded, the salon provided temporary elevated space for some passengers to climb onto, using counters and chairs to stay above water. Crew members guided individuals in and out of these spaces safely, using them as short-term refuges while directing evacuation. The ship's carpenter crew also maintained small boats and rafts used for emergency drills. During the sinking, these vessels were deployed to support passengers who could not reach lifeboats. Crew and passengers tied together floating debris, creating additional buoyant platforms to save lives. Titanic's bridge officers attempted to navigate around ice fields after receiving multiple warnings from nearby ships. Despite evasive maneuvers, limited visibility at night, and the high speed of the vessel made collision unavoidable. Logs indicate that lookout reports were immediate, but the iceberg appeared suddenly, giving minimal time for effective course correction. The ship's firemen, who managed coal-fired boilers, remained at their posts feeding furnaces as water began to flood lower decks. Their continued work ensured that steam pressure for pumps and lighting remained functional, providing crucial extra minutes for lifeboat deployment and evacuation. Many of these men did not survive, but their sacrifice was instrumental in saving hundreds of lives. Titanic's lifeboats were lowered in complex sequences to avoid collisions and capsizing. Crew coordinated manually with ropes, pulleys, and careful weight distribution, improvising where davit mechanisms malfunctioned. Passengers were instructed to remain seated and stable, with some assisting in rowing or bailing water during the long wait for rescue. Floating debris played a vital role in survival. Doors, crates, and furniture fragments were used as rafts, while ropes and blankets were tied to increase stability. Survivors often had to shift weight strategically, work together to maintain balance, and endure freezing temperatures until Carpathia arrived. The ship's carpentry and maintenance teams also managed the release of small steam valves and hatches to prevent localized explosions or boiler pressure buildup. These efforts, largely unnoticed by passengers, contributed significantly to the controlled collapse of compartments and prevented additional immediate hazards. Survivors later described the surreal experience of night sky observation while afloat. Some reported seeing bioluminescent plankton in the cold Atlantic, providing faint illumination around lifeboats. This eerie glow highlighted the vastness of the ocean and the isolation of survivors as they awaited rescue. Titanic carried a set of lifeboat drills that were intended to familiarize passengers with emergency procedures. However, due to time constraints and passenger schedules, many first-time travelers had not participated. During the disaster, crew improvised, giving on-the-spot instructions, demonstrating how to board boats, and explaining proper positioning to maintain stability in the water. The ship's anchor handling crew played an unexpected role during the sinking. They assisted with ropes, lines, and davits, helping to launch lifeboats where standard crew positions were insufficient. Their familiarity with heavy equipment and precise handling techniques proved essential in stabilizing lifeboats under extreme conditions. Titanic's onboard kitchens contained large ice storage rooms, which preserved perishable foods for first-class dining. During evacuation, some passengers broke into ice stores to melt ice for drinking water. Crew assisted in distributing ice and water to lifeboats, improvising under the threat of rising floodwaters. Titanic carried its own ship's newspaper, the Atlantic Daily Bulletin, produced on board for passengers. Printed articles and announcements provided entertainment and information. After the collision, staff salvaged printing materials and documents, preserving some issues that later became historical artifacts documenting shipboard life and early voyage events. The ship's galley staff, accustomed to preparing multi-course meals for hundreds, adapted to emergency conditions by assisting passengers and crew with distributing food and water. They helped carry provisions to lifeboats and created makeshift trays and containers to prevent supplies from being lost in the turbulent sea. The ship's smokestacks contributed indirectly to passenger survival during the sinking. As the stern lifted and funnels collapsed, displaced air and water pushed floating debris upward, creating temporary rafts and support structures. Survivors clung to these floating materials, gaining vital buoyancy while awaiting rescue. Titanic's electricians continued working to maintain lighting in stairwells and passageways, even as water levels rose around them. They manually rerouted circuits, replaced blown fuses, and illuminated critical evacuation routes. This work helped prevent panic and ensured that passengers could see lifeboat locations despite failing main electrical systems. Crew members specialized in hull maintenance were instrumental during the final moments. They observed structural weaknesses, reinforced hatchways, and cut away obstructing debris to facilitate passenger movement. Their efforts, though largely unnoticed, improved evacuation efficiency and saved additional lives. The ship's heating systems, initially designed for passenger comfort, were repurposed in emergencies to provide warmth in areas where survivors temporarily gathered. Steam pipes and radiators provided heat to lifeboats brought close to the ship's sides, offering brief respite from the freezing Atlantic night.